Yes.
Changes the neighborhood. Yes.
All right.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I believe we have one other celebration. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. President Stoltz, trustees, I ask that Mr. Mark Fowler, our Chief of Secondary Education, introduce our second celebratory leaders.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wright, President Stoltz, trustees. I invited here tonight Ms. Wolpe, Mr. Cox, and Mr. Lambright, if they would step towards the mic. We invited them here tonight just to celebrate the wonderful event that the Homecoming Parade is. And as someone who grew up in Richmond, Indiana, I never got to experience that parade. And so I got to experience it for the first time this year, and it was a wonderful event. So I wanted to make sure that we gave them the opportunity to talk about that event and the wonderful event it is for our community.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for recognizing the efforts that the people behind me do for the RHS Homecoming. It's one of the biggest student events that we have during the school year. We try to involve all students in Richmond Community Schools by sending out our Spirit Week and our Homecoming Parade. So I am going to ask each of these folks who, again, are the organizers behind the scenes at Homecoming. Each of them have a certain area that they are in charge of. I'm going to let Mr. Lambright go first. He has cross-country practice. He left. He has to go right back. So he has been the parade guru for many, many years. So Hunter Lambright's going to talk about our homecoming parade.
I've done the parade for now. This is 10 years minus the 2 that we didn't parade. And I was the student council sponsor up until last spring. Hung around for one more year to coach AJ Cox and Abby Bussey into how it's done. And honestly, I felt like this was the year that we finally got it all the way right. So we think.
Thank you, Hunter, again, for as many years and for staying on this year and handing down that tradition. Student Council at Richmond High School is in charge of all of the homecoming events. So AJ Cox and Abby Bussey are now co-leaders of our Student Council, so I'm going to have them come up next and talk about some of the events.
Yeah, so I'm in charge of what's called the Homecoming Games. It's actually ran by the Bleacher Creatures, but I'm involved in both, so it's a little bit of both of us, I guess. This year we had 156 participants from 9th through 12th grade, and they play all kinds of fun games out on the football field, and it's a great time. So yeah, and we also kind of shadowed Lambright when it came to the parade, so yeah.
One of the other things that we did starting last year and also this year is decorate the hallway. Last year we did more hallways, but it took a lot of time. So this year we picked the most busy hallway, and we had all of the grades collaborate on it. So they each picked a decade to go along with the homecoming theme dance, and then they all decorated signs to go along with the 60s or the 70s. And then we just had one night, it was a Monday night, we went up there and they all hung them up. The cheerleaders helped out, so we had a lot of kids involved, and it looked really good. It was pretty impressive, actually.
All right, and also as part of the homecoming activities, Hannah Lewis. Hannah, I'm going to let her tell you guys how much money they made in the dunk tank. That was her idea. Hannah is the junior class sponsor, so they're in charge of prom. So they have to earn lots of money. So Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah Lewis. So as Ray said, I am the junior class sponsor and in charge of prom. My kiddos that I'm in charge of had $0 to work with for prom last year, so we had to really fundraise. At the homecoming game, we had a dunk tank fundraiser where kids could dunk teachers. It was $1 a throw. One of our student teachers was doubling kids' tickets, so he would, if they bought 5 tickets, he bought them 5 more. We raised over $700 on a dunk tank.
Wow. members of our student council are Trey Wilson. Trey, all right, Trey. And also, Trey is our freshman class council sponsor. And then Renee Cola is our sophomore class sponsor. So both of them contributed again to helping the group put on homecoming. And then for the first time in how many years? 6 years? We haven't had a homecoming dance. We used to have it after the football game. Attendance went down, so we didn't have it. And then the kids told us, well, we don't like it after the football game. And so one of the things we try to do at Richmond High School is listen to our kids, and we want to give them voice. When we had our grade level assemblies at the beginning of the school year, that's one of the things that we emphasized. We said, students, this is your school. We need to hear your voices. So one of the things that resulted from that was our first homecoming dance on Saturday night, and our National Honor Society and our academic team sponsor, Mr. Hilbert is the academic team sponsor, and they organized and put on the homecoming dance. So I'm going to have Derek Warch, who is our National Honor Society sponsor, tell you a little bit about the dance and how many students attended.
Hi, good evening. As Ray said, this was the first year in many years that we've had a homecoming dance, and Brandon Hilbert and I were tasked with organizing the dance. In terms of theme, we chose Red Devils Through the Decades. We asked students what theme that they wanted, what theme they supported. A lot of them said, just do something for our school. So actually, I drew inspiration from the class of 1990. They had the Decade of the Devil. They just had a reunion. So I thought, absolutely, we can play off that. Red Devils Through the Decades, with each class being assigned a different decade. The seniors were the 60s, the juniors 70s, sophomores 80s, and the freshmen were 90s. We had 313 students attend our dance, which was great. The enthusiasm, the excitement was definitely palpable. I think students enjoyed themselves. I was quite nervous being the first time having, to put on a dance. So I went around and I wanted to make sure, are the students happy? And it was resounding yes. They really enjoyed it. They enjoyed having it in Tiernan. For example, in the lobby, we had tables that were set out. That way, it wasn't as noisy. It wasn't as crowded. They appreciated having the opportunity, if they wanted to go into the gym itself, to dance, or if they just wanted a more, quiet time with a more intimate group of friends, that was also provided. It was exciting. I enjoyed it. One other note, for example, there was a student who helped us prepare for the dance to decorate. He's a junior, so he needed something 70s. And while preparing for the dance, he called his mom. He's FaceTiming with her, saying, I don't know what to wear. And then a light bulb clicked in my head. And another hat that I wear at this building is I'm on the Alumni Association. And we had a 1976 Letterman jacket in our closet. So I was like, Xavier, would you like to wear this? You can be best dressed, absolutely. You have authentic, material for the night. But it was wonderful. Again, students enjoyed themselves, and I look forward to next year's homecoming dance.
I just want to end with how grateful I am to be the principal at a building where I have teachers like this that think of kids first and think about doing things for kids. I am so grateful. I have a whole building full of teachers that make things happen for kids, whether it's homecoming or whether it's graduation and in between. So again, I feel blessed to be the principal of Richmond High School because of this staff that I get to serve. I have the privilege and honor of serving. So thank you.
Board, questions, comments?
I just just want to say I was so excited to hear about the homecoming dance coming back. I mean, when I was here in the 90s, that was huge. So yeah, very excited about that. And then as far as the homecoming games, my kids loved those. That was what they talked about 2 or 3 weeks prior, and then about 2 or 3 weeks after, and then yeah, and then it was pretty stiff competition too. I mean, yeah. So thank you guys for your efforts on that. Love it. So, any others?
What all games were done at the homecoming games?
Yeah. Well.
So our first game we do is, I don't know what it's really called, but you get a tennis ball and you pick it up with your knees and you have to like run 10 yards and drop it. And then we do another game where one of their team members has to stand there while their other team members roll them with toilet paper. We do another one where they put a cookie on their head and they have to try to get it to their mouth without using their hands. And then we do capture the flag. And the last one is called rock, paper, scissors race, where they like line up 40 yards apart and they jump on every hash. And they do rock, paper, scissors. If you win, you advance. If you lose, you peel back. Oh, it's nuts. They get hyper competitive. It's crazy. It's really crazy, yeah.
No, I love the school spirit.
I'm glad to see it back.
I'm wondering what teachers were in the dunk tank, because I feel like if you offer to do that, you should receive recognition in a public setting, because it's pretty brave. Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Amix did the dunk tank for we administrators. We're very grateful to him.
If I can ask Ms. Galactic and Mr. Wilson, if the two of you all could come to the microphone, just share if you don't mind, because I know in meeting with you all individually last year, the pride and the joy and the ownership, as I mentioned before, even with Star Elementary and throughout our corporation. What did you find to be most joyous, and what are you most not looking forward to next year? From a logistical standpoint, I know that sometimes it can be a little more challenging than what people see.
Or for just, I guess, with our classes.
Well, next year for me will be junior year.
Yep.
And so prom is going to be very, very big. I am going to hopefully get Hannah to give me some pointers because she's doing it this year. Not at all. Like, it's a piece of cake.
Share with us what motivates you to do what you've done and continue to do.
Well, what motivates me is my students, because, like, I came to Richmond and I was amazed at the teachers that we have here, at the support that is given all of the students and the opportunities that they have. That's something that where I grew up, we didn't really have. I grew up in a tiny, tiny, tiny town. And, you know, my children go here and they're getting an amazing education. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to feel like not just a teacher. I want to be someone that can help the students find fun in education as well, not just how do you conjugate a verb, you know? Even though I love conjugating verbs, some of them don't. And so that's why I did it, because I want the students here to see that they're important.
Mr. Wilson?
So every single day when I come into this building and I get to see those kids, it's something that it genuinely makes me happy. I wake up every single day ready to see these kids. And knowing the impact just in my short, this is my second year now, knowing the impact that I can already make and every single one of these teachers in this room make every single day, it just fills me with that energy to keep going. Even on the hard days, especially with these freshman group, as we all know, freshmen can be fun, but when it comes to the student council side of it, I've been very, very lucky. I got a very driven group of freshmen. I mean, we've done 3 concession stands already this semester, and there's been an overwhelming amount of people that have signed up. We actually had to cut off the list because they all wanted to help out, and we only had a certain number of spots. So going into next year, when it comes to student council, it looks like just getting into the fundraising aspect of it some more. We're doing kind of some trial runs this semester and this year, just getting the freshmen acclimated, and then next year it's going to get way deeper into it because we're only a year away from prom. So it's definitely exciting, a lot to look forward to, but as Hannah can probably attest, there's going to be a lot of planning and a lot of grunt work coming for it.
Awesome. Tremendous job. Congratulations. Keep it up.
Thank you. All right, we are now going going to be moving into the budget portion of our meeting, 3.01, and I'm going to declare the public hearing open. I believe this is all Jamie, right?
Yes.
Okay.
She has a presentation for everyone.
Let me go ahead and preface this as she's setting up. The purpose of this hearing is to offer the public an opportunity for comments and questions regarding the 2024-2026 Capital Projects Plan, the 2024 through 2028 School Bus Replacement Plan, as well as the 2024 budgets. So that's what we're talking about.
Well, thank you. Sorry, I was playing with the pointer. This is why they don't give me these, because I quickly get my attention diverted. So this may be a little bit a different approach, but I felt like it was important as we're looking at trying to prioritize and level set our goals and prioritize our resources that are very limited, and trying to prioritize those where our goals are. I feel like it's important to try to show you where we're at, where I think we need to steer to, and the options that we have available, while also pointing out some of the restrictions that we're certainly faced with. So that's what we're going to walk through. First, I want to provide you some legislative updates that have impacted the budget in one way or another. As you know, House Bill 1001 eliminated the textbook rental fees, or schools being able to charge textbook rental fees or for curricular materials to our parents. I think it is a very advantageous piece of legislation, especially for our parents. On the other side of that, it does potentially have an adverse effect, I think an unintended consequence, if the allocated $160 million that the state set aside, if we exceed those funds, the school would have to start absorbing those funds. I think right now we're showing about $162 per student allocation. One of the things too that it eliminated was the ability to issue debt replacements on the unreimbursed textbooks, which was about $200,000, just a little over $200,000 a year. So that's something that we'll look at very closely, but we're definitely making sure that that is something that we keep a close eye on. Next, House Bill 1001 addressed school levies and referenda. Basically, it requires the county auditor to distribute a portion of the revenue that's received from an operations fund levy imposed by a school corporation to certain charter schools. This is one that we certainly was watching, because at first it was pretty wide open and they began to limit it to certain counties and certain school corporations. It's something that I think for public education and the funding of that, that we need to collectively keep an eye on, because it could have impacts, it could have far outweighing impact if we don't keep a close eye on that. So it doesn't impact us, but I think it's important to point out just so that we kind of keep our eye on that moving forward. Next is House Bill 1449, increase in assessed value. So this year, payable this year, they saw very high increases in assessed value, and you'll see that as we go along throughout the state, which directly impacts the property tax liability, especially for homestead or residential properties. It really shifted a burden to those. So what they were trying to do was trying to start limiting the ceiling and start controlling the growth on assessed value and property taxes, which is where a great portion of our budget is funded. But basically this just puts in some parameters as far as percent over maximum operating referendum. We don't have an operating referendum right now, but buckle up, because that's going to be part of the tools that we may have available in our tool chest. House Bill 1449 discussed controlled projects, and it just modifies some of the language within that and the rate at which you can exceed your levy for those controlled projects. Again, that doesn't impact us right now, but it's something that we certainly want to keep in mind as we move forward with certain debt issuances. House Bill 1591 was the teacher compensation threshold. They amended the statute that previously had 45%, and they, for full-time teachers, that the salaries of 45% of your education had to go towards teacher salaries. They modified that language to 62% of the state tuition, and they changed the teacher definition to include adjuncts and counselors and other positions that they had previously did not include in that definition. So we certainly met the 45 with just the salaries, and the 62 includes the benefits, and we're well above that. House Bill 1499 is additional property tax relief. So they eliminated the mortgage deduction of $3,000, but they applied that to the homestead. Again, what they're seeing is a shift, an unintended shift to residential home property owners. And so what they're trying to do is limit that shift moving forward in pay 24 and pay 25. So those provisions just really try to help ceiling or cap some of those shifts, and kind of really shifts it and misguides it back to commercial properties and agricultural, non-residential or non-homestead residential. Here in Richmond, it really will not impact them because for the most part they are all hitting the circuit breaker. But what that means to the school is additional circuit breaker loss then. So that is something that's calculated in when I was taking a look at our projected circuit breaker loss. Going through, I'm trying to be mindful where some of this is very basic to me, but I'm trying to be mindful of a new school board member, and also just try to walk through some of the budget basics, especially for those in attendance. Aren't you glad you get to walk through this presentation? I'm so sorry. But I'm going to walk you through just some key terms: the maximum levy, growth quotient, assessed values, tax rates, and circuit breaker, because it's all very impactful to the limited resources that I feel like we have available here at Richmond, especially when you look at us and compare us to other schools, whether it be in this county, other schools throughout the state. I think you can see what is limiting us in being able to achieve some of our goals. So in walking through, and I'm not going to read these to you, but they are there, the maximum levy is just a term. It basically just shows you the maximum amount that you can collect in your property tax revenue. Net assessed value is, that determines basically your portion, each individual person's tax bill. Their net assessed value is just their piece of the pie. And that's what's used to help come to at the tax rate. So, and that percentage is out the levy that we're collecting. Property tax rate is just the rate which is applied to each property's net assessed value. So as we go through the maximum levy growth quotient, this is something too that the legislature really touched this year. They capped that growth quotient. What that means is it's a quotient based off of non-farm, non-agricultural sales, income sales for the last 6 to 7 years. Basically, that showed that we were able to increase our levy, which is our ability to collect funds, right, in a major, in our debt service and our operations fund. We were supposed to be able to increase that 5.1%. Well, the state capped that this year, and they put it at 4%. So it really restricts additional funding that we can have coming in through that operations fund. So I just wanted to provide that information. This next chart just shows you the history of the levy growth quotient. As you can see, it should have been 5.1%. We're using annual non-farm personal income from 2016 to 22. So that again, as we go through this, you'll see how some of these things tie together with not only what we can try to charge and collect to have available to our resources, but also how it impacts the circuit breakers. The gross assessed value is basically just the assessed value that the assessor sets prior to any deductions being applicable on each individual property. And what I'm showing you here is, this is just a good chart that shows you where the state average is. 13.2% is what the state saw on average as an increase in net assessed value and gross assessed value. As you can see from the chart, we are well below that growth in assessed value. What that means is when you have that levy exceed the assessed value growth, it's going to mean additional circuit breaker loss, which means less funding that's coming into the school. And so we're certainly behind the state average on that. Here's the NAV change by property class. This just shows you that first column there. I was going to try to use the pointer. There we go. That there is the residential, and you can see how high that went. That was that push towards the residential property this last year. But again, you can see the average change between all of the property taxes, whether it's residential, apartments, ag, commercial, or industrial. The change was on average 14.7%. Again, we're very much below that. So as we go forward here, we're going to get into more of our Richmond data. You can see this is our trend line. We have seen very minimal growth in assessed value. And as I started diving into, okay, what's restricting our net assessed value? Because the more that can grow, the more resources we have available, the less circuit breaker we lose. Well, as I started digging in, the city of Richmond utilizes TIF districts, tax increment finance districts. That is funding that comes off of our books and our ability to collect, and it's capped. So any new growth that we get for new commercial property and new investments, that is going to more so towards economic development that the city has more control over, and the schools, while the hope is to bring in, additional people and businesses, we're educating them, but the schools aren't getting that revenue. So I saw that. I also saw a lot of taxable property come off the records, whether that's being sold to a charitable, a hospital. So as a non-for-profit and non-taxable property expands their footprint, that property comes off, that burden is shifted. And so what we're seeing here is it's shifting to those residential properties. But we really haven't seen much of a growth. Here's the chart. We are at 2.31% growth this year. What that means is if we're seeking 4% growth in levy, which is that income that's coming in from those property taxes, but we're only growing in assessed value 2.31%. That difference we're going to lose to circuit breakers. So our circuit breaker is going to continue to increase. And you can just see here how far we've been off on those state averages for our net assessed value base. This next slide is just, the higher the net assessed value, the lower the tax rate. The lower the tax rate, the lower the circuit breaker. So it's just to show kind of how it all plays together and ties together. Just the same, the lower the net assessed value, the higher the tax rate, the higher the circuit breaker loss. That is just to show you how that tax rate is calculated. It's just that certified levy divided by the net assessed value for our district. This is our 2023, our current budget order. So that just shows you what the certified budgets are for an individual fund, the assessed value, and then that tax rate. So that's kind of usually the starting point. You always start with where you are now as you're building to where you're going, the roadmap to where you're going. This is just a circuit breaker, again, just to show you what is a circuit breaker. It's just a tax cap that's placed on individual property classes. Homestead properties are capped at 1%. Commercial and personal property industrials at 3%. Agricultural, long-term care, non-homestead residential is capped at 2%. I would say we have a lot of properties that are hitting the tax caps, which is why our circuit breaker loss is so high. This is here to show you what the state, again, averages are as far as the total tax liability. And you can see that the total tax liability increased by greater than 12% for 20 counties. The reason Wayne County and Richmond didn't increase at the state average is because we have abnormally very high circuit breaker loss. So we're already capped at those limits, so we're not going to see, our property tax owners are not going to see growth beyond that, which is good for the property tax owners, but it is deficit and a loss of revenue for our school systems. Here's the statewide, this is the tax liability change by property class. You can see that first column there is 18.2%. So statewide, they saw an 18.2% increase this year on residential properties. The average between classes is 10.5%. So here, this was an interesting slide because what this is showing me is the percent of the levy. Remember again, that levy is the amount we should be collecting from our property taxes. This is the average statewide. The blue is from 2022, that's payable 2022, and the orange is 2023. So you can see this decreased here, the statewide average decreased, and that's because those net assessed values on average rose so much higher than what that growth quotient for the levies increased. So on a statewide average, 8.4% is lost of the levy to circuit breakers until you get to Richmond. So this is what it looks like for Richmond Community Schools. This is the percent loss to the total levy. And you can see how it tracks here, but this is the total levy. Well, the thing is the debt service is a protected tax, protected class. So we don't lose circuit breaker in our debt service. But we do, as you can see, lose it here. This little light blue piece of the pie is what we would lose in the debt service fund. But since it's a protected class, it ends up all coming out of the operations fund. So we are projected to lose $3.4 million of our levy to circuit breaker. What does that look like for Richmond? This far right line here is what's projected for 2024. You see where we are. That's 36%. We lose 36% of our operations levy to property tax caps, which is that over $3 million. You see this red line here, that's that state average. So we lose all of this here in addition to what that state average is. This here is what the circuit breaker looks like at that state average. If we were at that state average, this is what we would be losing. Next, I wanted to look at the tax rate comparisons because I want to see where our tax rate stacks up against all the other comparable schools. This was very interesting the further I dug into it. On one hand, we're winning in the sense that we have the lowest tax rate in the state. On the other hand, it's very limiting on the resources that we can bring into our school. And I think that that's what's challenging us to try to divide up all of these resources amongst all of our important goals that we have. So what I show here is this is just Wayne County schools. The first column there is Nettle Creek. The blue is their unit total. It's their total tax rate. The orange is their debt service rate. And then that little piece there, that gray, Western Wayne has a referendum. They're the only ones in the county that have a referendum. But you can see over here, this is Richmond. We are by far the lowest total rate and even more drastically the lowest debt service rate. So that's our ability to bring in revenue for those revenue generating funds. I then thought, okay, well, let's compare ourselves to the North Central Conference. So that's what I did. Over here again is Richmond. You can see the total rate is well below. This solid line here is the average total tax rate. The dotted red line is the average debt service rate. Well, you can see Richmond is well below. That's the average line for the blue. This is the average line for the orange. We again are I look at it as last place. But we are definitely the lowest tax rate. And I am confident to say we are one of the lowest tax rates in the state of Indiana. What that does is you start to look at other comparable data and what our goals are with student achievement and being competitive with our staff salary and what benefits we can offer. It's challenging because our resources are so limited compared to what every other school is trying to approach this at. So we're already starting, it's like you're starting a 400-meter race and you're giving them a 300-meter lead. And so we're already starting, if you will, from behind. So the key takeaway so far as we get into this is the state has capped the levy growth in a way to try to offset any increased property taxes. The state capped the referendum growth for schools. RCS is well below the state average for gross assessed value and net assessed value increases. The maximum levy growth increases here in Wayne County outweigh the NAV increases, which results in higher circuit breaker or more funding that we're not bringing into the school. RCS has the lowest overall tax rate and the lowest overall debt tax rate in the county, in the conference, and I don't want to say in the state because I didn't look at every single one of them, but I am confident to say that we are the top 5 lowest in the state, but we are definitely pressing hard for that number 1 spot. So the lack of funding, and I think another key point was just as I started comparing us to our comparables, it's the lack of funding availability that we have to be competitive in a market that we should be competitive in for our teachers, for our support staff. This is the mechanism that we can grow our funds to be able to utilize them, like I said, to put them towards our goals. So again, just what does this mean? It means we're limiting our resources to fund the corporation goals. To best achieve growth and student achievement, we have to continue to stabilize our staff and offer proper classroom supports. We need to maximize the available resources that we have. This can't be fixed in 1 year. It shouldn't be. But we need to start looking at what that fix looks like so we can begin addressing the concerns. So as we go forward, what are the available options? How do we go about this? And I think of it as we've got all of these tools in this tool belt or this tool chest. We need to just start pulling out different tools so we can address this. Some of the options: increase that debt to offset the operations fund, offset operation fund to other funding sources to decrease that transfer percentage from the education fund to the operations fund. The more you decrease that percentage transfer, the more education fund that you'll have available. There's operating and capital referendums that many schools are taking advantage of. Common school fund loans, they're 1% interest right now. We can repay those through debt service. Excess levy appeals, you can do that for transportation, bus replacement, and school safety. But overall, we just need to use some of the tools that are in our toolbox. So maximizing operation fund dollars. The recent surge in operational costs, coupled with a capped operations fund levy growth of 4%, many schools have started to consider other options to increase operation fund revenue and or shift expenditures out of that operations fund. Because again, the more you can shift off that operations fund, the more you can shift the percentage from the education to that operations. Some of these options include tax-exempt general obligation bonds, taxable general obligation bonds, transportation levy appeals. Many have looked at energy saving projects. I often give the example here, at my prior school, we were coupled with it was before collective bargaining year, we wanted to put as much money as we could, and we were really restricted. It was then the general fund. It was before they changed the funding mechanism. So what we did was we looked at what our highest expenses were in that general fund. Well, one of them was our utilities. Our utilities were very high, and I thought, how can we outwork the utility company here? Well, we decided to take out a debt obligation bond on a wind turbine. We self-generated our own energy, pulled that whole expense then out of the general fund, put that kept it in the general fund for those general expenditures, and we're able to offset that to a debt fund and generated our own energy. So not only was it a savings, we started generating revenue too. So am I saying this to say, hey, let's build a turbine? No. But what I'm saying is we can also look at lighting, the return on investment with some of those energy saving projects. And then lastly, an operating referendum. Uniquely, an operating referendum is not subject to the circuit breaker, and you can apply it towards the TIF funds. There is a substantial amount of TIF revenue that normally the school would get about half of. That it's not because that money is not going to the school, but on an operating referendum, you can tax that. You can basically go in there and get your piece because we're servicing those kids in our town here. So that's a unique way that many schools have gone about offsetting those operational expenses. The other is the transportation and bus replacement levy appeal. Last year, I think it was about this time, in order to address the busing concerns, there was a contract that was brought that increased that transportation expense line. And if the transportation exceeds 10% over the preceding year, you can request a transportation excess levy appeal. To be able to, instead of absorb that $400,000 increase in the operations, which again then is impacting all the other funds, you can request a levy appeal that will go out and raise that money for that increase so the other funds aren't experiencing that. So you'll see that built within this budget. The roadmap to maximizing revenue to fund corporation goals, after taking a look at all of this, one of the things I think we can do is to have a transportation levy appeal to offset the operations fund for that increase of 17% to the transportation line. Begin utilizing common school fund loans at 1% to offset the operations fund. It's one of those things that many use to get a project in completion and you pay for it at 1%, which when you're getting investment return higher, you're spreading out that burden for those projects a little bit, but you can also issue a debt rate that is so minimal, it's not even 1 cent for every $100 of assessed value for many of those. Debt issuances to offset the operations fund. You can begin lowering the transfer percentage then from the education fund to the operations fund, retaining as much as you can in the ed fund. Utilize the offset revenue and new money to further offer competitive teacher and staff compensation by retaining more of that revenue over in the ed fund. And then again, we can maybe take a look at prioritizing the energy savings projects. So if you recall, I think it was 2 months ago, I brought to you an engagement letter with Stifel. They're a company I know that Richmond, I think, has used and worked with previously. I've had a great working relationship with them. And I said it was great to get the band back together because we've had some very successful projects, and I think that they do a great job of really looking at all of our needs. So this is something that I don't want to take their work. This is something that they put together. This is just a depiction of all of our current debt. It's right there from 2023 to 2028. Some schools usually extend over, more of a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year cycle. Ours is all right here. The gray at the top is from a 2021 lease. The green is a 2020 GEO bond. And the blue, which will expire in 2024, is a 2018 GEO bond. So again, if you look, you're supposed to see a dip here. And I want to capture that dip. So looking forward here, if you look, and I know this is probably small to be able to see, I just wanted options. I wanted to be able to say, okay, what options do we have? Because we have to start looking at them. We have to attack this differently. We have to go about it differently. So what we have here is obviously the first line's no borrowing. The next line's a $1 million debt issuance, all the way up to a $10 million debt issuance. And what would that look like to that tax rate? Well, if you go over here, for 2024, it would not do anything, because at this point, we would just be gearing up to issue the debt, right? So we wouldn't have spent any of the funds yet. So we would be gearing up, and in 2025 is when the increase, you would see the increase. So it really wouldn't impact this budget as far as a tax rate, but it can impact it based off of the committed response to see what we're able to do more quickly to offset those expenses again, especially if it's obligated. But what you can see here is that last line. You would see 4 cents if issued a $10 million bond over, and I think it's over, and it's on the next page, a 15-year repayment. When I looked, that 4 cents, our debt service rate lowered from 22 to 23 by more than 4 cents. So we would just be trying to capture back where we were. What does that mean for property tax owners? If you're at the 2 and 3%, nothing. You're not going to experience it. What we would be doing is Richmond would be coming in here like all these other schools in the state of Indiana. I can say really all of them since we have the lowest tax rate. We would just be coming in and saying, you know what, we're going to get our piece of the pie so that we can do the things that we need to do here. So that's what that is. Here is just the different options. And again, it's spread out to repayment, as you can see here, to 2039. And again, that's just to try to diversify even more of what our debt issuances look like. And the options are just there. The different options are all of your different colors there of what that looks like. Here again, I found it interesting because they also did a comparison, and this comparison is of the nearby schools, and this again, they used the total tax rate. You know how I compared the total tax rate and the debt service rate? They compared the total tax rate, and Richmond's all the way over here, and those are in nearby schools. Again, nearby schools, those are schools that we're trying to compete with in all of the other areas. Then looked at it from what's just the debt rate. Well, the debt rate drops even more. Again, the last one over here. So again, nearby schools, the ones that we're trying to be in a competitive advantage to, and we are substantially, in fact, we are 13 cents lower than the next tax rate. So what I did was start looking at what those options that we had available and what that would mean in those comparisons that we have. So that's what you see here. It's the same school comparisons. And what I did was put 2 lines as far as one, the solid one would be the debt service rate increase for the school. So you can see we're all the way over here. This solid line is where Richmond's debt service rate would go to if we did the $10 million debt issued, and if we just took $500,000 to $1 million common school fund loan and placed it to the debt. And we would still be the lowest tax rates here. This dashed line is simply just the average of all of those. The next is, what if we did the $10 million debt assumed issuance, we did the common school fund loan, and we did the levy excess. What would that look like? This is the total tax rate. This isn't just the debt service rate. This is the total tax rate. What would that do to our total tax rate? It would move us from that little gap up to that solid line, well below the average and still in last place. But what it's doing is taking those measured steps to begin to diversify and to be able to utilize some of those tools more effectively. So as we get into the budget, it's difficult to build a budget around, hey, all of those other pages, let's take a look at what we can do to change all of the work that I've already done. So I try to go about it in a way of utilizing last year as definitely a compass, but also trying to show you by trying to maximize those other resources, we can maybe also further extend where we're going. What you will have here is the Form 1, which is the budget estimate as of right now, the Form 2, miscellaneous revenue. I will tell you that I did advertise in the Form 3, which is the notice. It's something everybody does. You always advertise, you try to advertise the ceiling, not to exceed, and that's what you'll see displayed in the Form 3. The capital projects plan is attached, and those are also and have been available on our website and on the DLGF's website. What we're looking is how can we capture that capital projects plan and offset some of those expenditures to that debt issuance. And that's what I guess more so that I'm looking to do, while also expanding that transportation. We fit the examples perfectly in trying to expand that transportation levy. So next steps, obviously, here's our public hearing for the 2024 budget, capital projects plan, and bus replacement plan. What I'd like to do is further kind of pinpoint it for you, the adoption process, to see what that final adopted budget will look like, because it's really going to be impacted based, again, off that revenue. What we can begin to do also, in order to minimize any interest that we have outstanding if we issue a $10 million debt, we can minimize that interest by utilizing some cash on hand, going ahead even and starting what schools have done, is we pass a resolution that says we will reimburse ourselves if we utilize cash balance. We can go ahead and start utilizing any cash balance that we want to, even if it's a minimal, to start some of that capital projects plan. And we can, as we go through the debt issuance, we can reimburse ourselves for that. But what that does is it minimizes the interest that we're paying, because we're not paying the interest over the longer span of time. So what I'm here to do is just kind of see what a consensus is for the transportation levy excess, for the debt issuances, and the utilization of common school fund loans. Again, then at the following meeting, which is on October 18th, which is actually when you would adopt the overall budget, we can then, once we see that, we can begin offsetting those expenses to maximize the operations fund and the education fund. We could look at classified support staff increases. Again, I have a plan, but what I don't want to do is put the proverbial cart ahead of the horse in that bringing a increase without the funding mechanism. And so I think it impacts so much of what we're able to do. And then additionally, we would adopt or could adopt a resolution to reimburse pending debt issuance. I do think, and I'll close with this, I do think it's important to note that, again, this would be it would be basically taking the tax rate where it was a year ago, 2022, and it would be very minimal increases. Now, does that mean that there's, in the property tax world, I was a county assessor when Chrysler, during the Chrysler bankruptcy and during the GM bankruptcies, and I don't ever like to predict what property taxes will do, but all things consistent, that's what I'm telling you would be the impact. We can't control who buys what property and if they come off the tax rate. We can't control if another school corporation issues debt. We can't control if the city annexes. We can't control so many things. This is just looking at what our control measures are. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
All right, at this time, we would like to open the floor for questions as they pertain to this portion of the public meeting. So, and that's questions from the public and questions from the board.
Good evening, thank you. My name's Robert Coddington. Very nice presentation, very informative. There are two things. If we raise the debt, That's a protected levy.
That is correct.
Correct. We will lose operation dollars.
Not proportional, it would be not one-to-one. It would be, we would lose circuit breaker, but not one-to-one. So we would definitely have a net levy gain.
So I haven't seen anything in your presentation to what that loss in operations fund would be and how much then you could transfer or leave in the education fund. That's why we're doing all of this, is to get more money into the educational fund.
That's right.
And you didn't respond to any of that from the loss of operations, from the debt service, to what it's going to save in the educational fund. I would like to see that, if at all possible, at the budget.
That's fair. Well, we would lose approximately, again, it's very hard to gauge because we can only control our measures here. And all the other districts right now are putting together their budgets. And obviously, as with the circuit breaker, what it did is marries all of us together uniquely. But we would see, so say we did an excess levy of $420,000. But the DLGF has to approve that. So it would be subject to the approval process of them as well. We would see about a about a 68% of that $420,000 excess levy appeal.
Okay, next question that I would have, and I've lost my train of thought for a moment. I would like to see that, and obviously this was a very complex presentation you made. If I can give a 30-second thing, if your tax rates are capped at 1%, 2%, and 3%, and you had you had evenly balanced residential, farming, and commercial, your tax rate would be $2, right? The tax rate for Richmond municipality with the school system is close to $4. You want to know why we're collecting $2 and we're funding out? Now that's a very simplistic way of doing it, but our tax rate, you know there's going to be a circuit breaker. If our tax rate goes up, the circuit breaker is going to go up because of the lack of net AV growth. Thank you very much.
And you're very correct, sir. The total debt for Richmond Center is $4.79, 4.7963. Of that, Richmond Schools is 0.74. Correct. And that's what I said, a lot of that is not a matter of, it's taking the pie and trying to expand our piece a little bit within that pie. And that's what I'm trying, I agree with you, and that's what I'm saying is it's hard to run so many different scenarios, and so much of it is based off of what the determination is. Is it that 1 million? Is it the 2 million? Is it the 3 million? Is it the 10 million? Once I get that honed in, absolutely there'll be more information. Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
Hi, I'm Beth Herrick. Thank you for your presentation. I am not super well versed in all of education fund and what that means, so it seems obvious to me that we need to capture more money. Very clear, good job making that point. I'm unclear about whether there's a prioritization of how that money will get spent. It seems obvious to me that with the stipends that were approved in the spring to give teachers greater salary compensation, that's a priority for the folks sitting up here. I wonder if you have a sense of like, oh, if we can get to this in terms of the levy or other better said phrasing that people know, if we get to this, then we will promise our teachers a package and our staff a package of this. That's one thing that maybe is happening in this process, but it's not clear to me. So if you haven't identified that, When do you identify it? And do you hope to drill down with those kinds of decisions? Because obviously you've made some decisions in even breaking process with how you made those decisions to fund the staff salary because you knew that that was a priority. So I'm wondering, do you have those priorities set? If not, when does that happen?
That's a great question. So one of the things I know that a couple school board meetings ago, Mrs. Golf brought a presentation to do a facility needs assessment, right? So that's how we're first going to address that 10 million, how we're going to address those needs assessment, because right now, much of that is being pulled from that operations fund to address all of those, and it's almost a Band-Aid type fix, because we're trying to fix our expansive campus with such limited resources. So that needs assessment, that facility needs assessment that I know that she's actively pursuing right now, will be prioritizing that $10 million. Then it is the goal to make sure, because a lot of our, we want to make sure that then we can pull and retain, not pull because it's leaving in the education fund, because when the funds change, and this is an approach that has been successful, I've utilized it at a prior school, and trying to just leave as much as we can there. Do I have the dollar amount? I don't, because I don't have the total tax rates. I don't have, but to be able to start trying to do those assessments, I need to have a gauge on, is it 10 million? Because if it's 10 million, that's going to be able to be a little bit more impactful in addressing those capital projects. If it's 1 million, not sure how far 1 million will go, and that needs assessment. So the bigger that we're able to look at that with that minimal impact, then we'll be able to relieve more in the education fund, and I think that's our goal. And knowing that student achievement is the overall arching goal for all of that, we 100% agree that the best way to do that is to retain our staff, our dedicated staff that are in front of our students every day. And that is the goal.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. I would charge the school board members to keep these questions in top of mind. Right now is a time that I think the community wants to find out how to support school success. And if that means a tax increase, tell us how much. What's that going to be? But tie it to supporting the students in ways that we know, and teachers are the biggest equation in that system. Thank you for answering my question.
Any additional questions or comments? Mr. Weber.
Before we pursue additional means to acquire money, I know we have a cliff coming of a lot of programs and people that are funded with ESSER money. I would like to see those dollars plotted out for the next few years to see where the losses are coming from, where the cliff actually hits, and then how this dovetails. Before we start spending this money on operations and other things, I think we have to decide if we want to maintain the programs that we've added, and if this is a way to help fund those. And I don't know exactly where all those numbers hit, and I don't know if you can provide those or not, but I think we have a lot of things that the funding is going away, and I would be very concerned about if we want to maintain those or not. And the first thing to do is to see where they are. So if you could maybe provide some insight down the road or in the next few weeks.
In the limited time that I've had in this role, we have began looking, obviously, at that. And yes, it does, and all of it needs addressed, and it's trying to prioritize that. That is something certainly that I know that we are tasked with because of there was a lot of ESSER dollars that were put into, like you said, new programming and salaries. That makes it very difficult. I think statewide I saw an assessment where Many schools utilize those resources for facility-type programming so that it would have a long-term impact and they wouldn't have that cliff. But here we are, and that does need addressed. It's going to be an ongoing fix, so I wish I had all the answers, but it's going to take a lot of discussion and further collaboration to have that answer, because it's going to be, what are the priorities of the board? Is retaining the ESSER, and I think some were just temporarily offset, and I think there was placeholders as much as possible placed in the education fund, but that definitely ties with this. And I think what's difficult is it's difficult to run 50 different scenarios. So I guess what I'm trying to do is to try to narrow that approach so that I can start making sure that all of those questions are answered. And I talked to Stifel yesterday for about 2 hours, and I'll tell you, their first approach is Richmond has to have an operating. They have to do an operating referendum. And I said, well, we'll find out what the gauge of the interest is to that just in a debt issuance, because we are so far behind on the resources that we're bringing in.
I'm wondering if we talked about the $10 million number, and you said 4 cents increase for assessed value in 2025. So what would that look like for a property owner of a $100,000 home? Like, what would that mean? Is that $4,000?
No.
No, I know it's not, but I think, yes.
Well, it depends on the assessed value, right? So it's 4 cents per $100 of assessed value. But then you also have to look at that the state legislature changed in 2025 how those, because it's not going to impact, like the gentleman said, it's not going to impact the 2 and the 3%. What we would be doing there is just squeezing in there and take a bigger portion of that pie. The 1%ers, the residential property owners, usually they say 4 cents. It depends on the individual makeup, but it could be $50, $100. We will run those scenarios if that's where they're looking at, but with 2025, some of those historic numbers that you could just pull off your head, now that they've changed the calculation to the homestead and to the supplemental homestead percentage, and that's going to be varying. So those are all those moving targets that you're also trying to take into account as we're navigating through this. But that's why I tried to tie it back to all things consistent would be that 2022 tax bill.
But the vast majority of taxpayers, especially in the city limits, are already at tax caps, and they wouldn't see an increase to their tax bill. It would just be changing the slice of the pie.
Correct, because once you get to that high of a tax rate too, even the 1%ers are getting there.
Correct.
And
the
majority would not see an increase at all, only if, and this is the assessor hat going back on, if their assessed value changes. It's going to change as that assessed value changes, because it's 1% of gross assessed value or 2% of gross assessed value. So as that assessment changes, which we have no control over, if that changed astronomically, then of course the percentages would change as that assessed value changes. But we do have the net assessed value for 2024. What you try to do is minimize the thought, and you can see within the Stifel presentation, they included an assumption of a 4% maximum growth quotient. It assumed a net assessed value growth of 0%. So what that does is kind of tries to give a worst case scenario, right? If there's no assumed growth in net assessed value, it's giving you the what would hopefully be the worst case. I guess worst case would be if there's a loss of assessed value. But so these numbers were ran off 0% net assessed value gain, which we have seen incremental increases, well below the state, but we have seen incremental increases, and then also assumes a growth quotient of 4% in 24-25.
So I know in Wayne County, the difference between gross assessed value, net assessed value is a large differential.
Yes.
Whether that is...
and that's unique too. In just doing a lot of comparisons, as
Correct.
you look at our tax structure, that's unique too. And I think it just speaks to the footprint of the tax exempt population here, yeah.
And in the TIF district, I think the city, in a round number, collects about $4 million in TIF revenues annually. And when you think that the school portion would be 45%, 50%, and then the not-for-profits that are in town, there's one large not-for-profit that would have approximately a $2.5 million tax bill based on their total assessed value, where zero is paid. So the differential, so I appreciate being able to look at some of the options, whether it's the debt service where you receive the upfront, the 100% of that portion of the levy and not the 64%. And I understand that it will pull some from that 64%. One of the other pieces on there, the school board last year had, I believe, about a $400,000 increase to Sodrel annually for transportation. The transportation levy is available as a potential option to offset some of those dollars that we are seeing from that increase.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, we saw about a 17% increase in that expenditure line for transportation, so we can offset that excess levy appeal in order to help fund that percentage change for the 24 budget.
And we can do that for the 24 budget?
That is correct.
Okay. And I would be in favor of moving forward with that. I think just knowing you have a consensus from this board would probably be helpful.
It would, just as I try to bring forth a budget to adopt and to try to answer any other outstanding questions that those may have. You know, obviously when you put something together, you try to think of all of them. But the more I can gauge that consensus, the better I can answer more specifically those questions.
Okay. So I think that, and as you said, this is a multi-year process, so that's an easy first bite, it seems.
Correct. And it's important to note too, again, if we did a debt issuance here in the next month or two, it would not reflect in the 24 debt service rate. So there would not be any impact in that debt service rate. It would be for 2025 when you see some of that dip anyway. So it's trying to capture that dip, so you're also trying to utilize some other debt falling off, right? But what it does impact for the 2024 budget is if we know that we can offset that capital expenditure. Now, the thing is we also have to keep in mind that this is, as we try to offset to then keep those dollars in the education fund to utilize them there, we also then have to look at, and that's why the operating referendum is so appealing, because it's a permanent replacement. And it's appealing because it's outside the circuit breaker, and it's appealing because it can be applied to those TIF dollars. So it won't impact the individual taxpayer as directly, because it's going to be spread out over a lot more assessed value, because there's so much assessed value in that TIF district that the operating referendum is a permanent fix, right? These are just steps to get there. The operating referendum is a permanent fix, and it can be applied to a lot bigger pool of assessed value, which is that TIF district.
Okay. And I believe
and to the gentleman's point, it won't be where it's offset from, it won't be offset loss with the circuit breaker, because it's outside the circuit breaker loss, which again is why that is appealing. But again, it's a multi-step process. I think
even if that was considered, these things probably should be also considered because we're so far behind in that funding.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Thank you for presenting some new. I want to thank you for presenting some new tools that we could implement. It's good to know that we could be proactive in fighting for a bigger piece of that pie. And in doing so, provide greater support for our teachers and ultimately our students. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right. We do need to have a close to the meeting. So do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Walton.
Second.
This is to close the budget meeting.
Yeah, sorry, to close the budget meeting. Okay, so all those in favor of closing the public hearing budget meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All right, those opposed, nay. All right. Vote passes 7-0. All right, moving on. Next we have 4.01, which is highlights and happenings. Dr. Wright.
President Stoltz, trustees, come before you this evening along with our Central Office leadership just to share briefly some of the many highlights and happenings that are taking place here in our amazing school corporation. First and foremost, in arriving in this role as superintendent, I was charged by our board to establish a professional learning organization and improve upon our professional learning communities within the corporation at each individual schoolhouse. And of the visionary perspective that I have echoed in some time as far as improving upon quality Tier 1 teaching instruction, systemic alignment, and the social emotional supports. What I am here before you this evening to report is that Dr. Josh Barnett, who is the CEO of the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, also known as NIET, which, if you all can recall, was implemented and approved some time ago. He visited our school corporation just last week and visited the effervescent Star Elementary School to bear witness with his own eyes the tremendous things that are occurring there at Star when it comes to teacher instruction and the implementation of the NIET instructional framework. One of the things that I asked Dr. Barnett, I said, Dr. Barnett, of the schools that you could have visited all over the country, which he does, why did you choose Richmond Community Schools? Why did you choose to come and see what ideally we were up to? And his response was simple. He stated that his regional representatives continue to tell him that he needs to, again, bear witness to the grassroots organic efforts that our amazing educators have been putting in motion along with the teacher leaders, our building level leaders, and the collective at large. And I asked him, I said, well, now that you've had a chance to be here, now that you've had a chance to see us in action, what's your major takeaway? And what he mentioned is that the intentionality and the compassion, the care, the love, and the overall ownership that our teachers took and improved upon their craft to improve upon their instruction to better yet serve students was phenomenal. And he agreed with his regional reps that the teachers here in Richmond have been and are and will continue to do amazing things. Next, I visited the Regional Indiana Urban School Association meeting last week, and there not only was I brought up to speed with a lot of the legislative happenings of the day, I also learned of a program called JAG, and the JAG program is one that I believe would be very beneficial, and we already are looking into ways in which we can introduce and usher in the JAG program, which again stands for Jobs for America's Graduates. It's a workforce development program that currently serves over 5,000 Indiana students in 125 schools across the state. Their central goals and focus is workforce preparation and employability skills. We know that here in our fair city, our beloved town, that the economy has not been as fruitful as it has been in the past. But one of the things we continue to hear with our community business partners is assuring that we are going to be graduating students that can walk right into some of their employment opportunities upon graduation. Finally, the past 2 days this week at the Indiana School Board Association Indiana Association of Public School Superintendent Joint Fall Conference. I had an opportunity to yet again glean a lot of great resources and intelligence as to what is occurring around the state and what successfully has been implemented in other school corporations. I attended several sessions, community communication best practices, workforce development, education after COVID-19 as far as zeroing in on curriculum, pedagogy, and organization. And in general, what I was able to truly bring back and be excited for is that not only here in Richmond, within our county, but also throughout our state, the commitment that so many are making to see that our students are put in positions of success. Finally, and I'm not going to steal his thunder, I believe he being Mr. Mark Fowler, may allude to homecoming, this being his first homecoming experience. I don't want to steal his thunder, but just the sheer appreciation that I know I had for our homecoming experience and those who were behind putting it together, and all of the teachers, the community members, the students. It really, again, was yet another joyous experience for our students and for the community at large. Mr. Fowler, the only thing I would suggest is that you save the candy for the Hub Etchison Parkway. You can't dismiss all of the candy there on West Main, because when you round that corner, those folks sometimes get gypped. And
Lesson
so
learned.
you'll learn.
I even gave him extra candy to get that far.
Did you now? Okay,
Yes.
okay. That's right. It was his first time. It was his first. And
Rookie.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But
All right, moving on to 4.02, HR and Finance.
yes, absolutely. And Mrs. Jamie Bowles is going to rejoin the conversation with her highlights and happenings.
Well, I had a feeling that I would be tired of hearing my own voice at this point today. So I don't want to refer to him as show and tell, but I asked Mr. Jeremy Hill if he would join us just to talk about the Teaching Academy and the experiences, because it's been wonderful that he and the e-learning team came with a thought, and to see it come to fruition has been wonderful. So with that, Mr. Hill.
Thanks. I'm going to start with some questions about the budget. No. Okay. Whoever put me after that, I don't appreciate that. But no, it's been going really well. So we always look at ways when we onboard new staff, what that looks like and how we can be most effective with that. A lot of that upfront training happens a couple days before we start the school year, and they're taking in a whole lot of stuff at one time. So it's really hard to do that. And also now in teaching, in the last few years, you've seen more people that need to be onboarded throughout the year. So you need that ongoing support and assistance. So we started the Richmond Teaching Academy this year. It's for new teachers that are new to us this year, and it's also for teachers that joined us after the first few days of last year as well. And so what we do is we meet once a month, and they come in right after they get out of school, so we stagger that. The elementary teachers come in first, and we're able to work with them. In August, we worked on things like Canvas and Power School and Parent Square, just to get them up to speed, make sure everything was working okay there. Then we follow up with that. The high school teachers come in after they get out of school, so we have two groups. We can get them some one-on-one help. We roll out some things, and we're able to break them out into smaller units and make sure that they have everything up to speed that they need to do. And then in September, we focused on Nearpod and AI and things like that. It's been really good. It's worked out really well. It's kind of a cohort process where we're allowed to bring them through and we stay with them. We'll meet one Monday a month through November, and then we'll be able to support them in that way. Today was our first meeting with the blended learning cadre. That's a group of teachers that have been, they're not new to the corporation, and we're working with them. That's similar to the cadre we did pre-COVID, so we're also trying to build some blended learning and UDL design skills throughout the different buildings in the corporation. And today was our first meeting with that. We're really excited about that one as well.
Questions, comments?
Sounds like you're doing some cool stuff. You're involved with the Summer of Learning too, aren't you?
Yeah, e-learning team, we host the Summer of E-Learning each year. We've applied for that again. This upcoming year, we'll find out soon if we get that. We're the longest running host in the state, and last year was a great one. So make sure if we get that, you get a chance to swing through. We had a little over 250 teachers from this area of the state, a few from Ohio as well last year, and that's we love that thing too. We'll see if we get that great grant. We'll find out pretty soon on that one.
Yeah, I've been kind of observant of that in the past, and stopped in for a few sessions. It's pretty cool to see all the collaboration.
Yep, that's a good one.
I want to say I love the ongoing onboarding concept. I remember coming in as a teacher 5 years ago and just being very overwhelmed with all of that
Yeah, there's
dumped
so
on you
much
at the
stuff
same time. So
initially.
that's, yeah. Thank you.
It's a lot.
Others?
And I believe, did I read somewhere the Department of Education has recognized this program and is helping support financially?
Yeah, we got a $10,000 grant from the IDOE, and part of that is going towards the blended learning cadre. And so the state's been great about that. They really liked what we were doing with. We have this thing called the first 15 days. It's a form. We worked with Franklin Central. They're doing something similar. Nadine Gilkinson over there. And so we earned a $10,000 grant for that. We're using part of it for that blended learning cadre, and then our team will be going to Dallas, Texas in February for the TCEA conference. So we're hoping to pick up some things to bring back that will then spin into the Summer of Learning conference. So we're looking forward to that one, and we're pretty excited about that.
Very cool. Appreciate it, Chairman.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Anything else, Jamie? Nope. Okay.
President
4.03.
Stoltz, trustees, I'm now going to ask Mr. Brent Baker, our Chief of Elementary Education, to join the conversation with his highlights and happenings. Mr. Baker.
All right, good evening. Yesterday, our instructional coaches provided our first session of RCS, OG, Orton-Gillingham training to our new K through 2 teachers, special education teachers, and interventionists. It was a great session. I think our teachers benefited greatly from that session. Our K2 students are using a new AI program called Amira. We hope the mixture of quality Tier 1 instruction along with support of Amira make a tremendous impact on our students' reading growth. I'm also excited to announce that RCS was awarded the Preschool Early Years Initiative Grant. The amount awarded is $300,000 to the expansion of our preschool programs at Vale, Star, and Fairview. This growth is important to our preschool programs at RCS as we have over 50 students still on a wait list for preschool. We continue to look for preschool instructors and paraprofessionals to grow our preschool program.
Do you know off the top of your head the enrollment of our pre-K?
The enrollment of pre-K.
The enrollment of pre-K?
I believe it's almost 300.
Almost 300?
Which is a rather considerate increase from last year.
What's our kindergarten enrollment, just as a comparison?
Well, our preschool enrollment is 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds both.
But just, so what's it, okay.
I think kindergarten enrollment is about 340.
And Mr. Walden, that's a great question because, again, as we know and as was the decision that was made, the goal in increasing that preschool community is, again, based on survey results and conversations with our community at large. But there was a need, and now that we have those students within our preschool, they're more inclined and likely to remain with us and remain right here in Richmond to attend our K through 12 experience as well. And so we're really excited, and I know that we still have, I believe, a position or two that we have to fulfill, but we're working on it. Yeah.
All right. Next, moving on to 4.04, secondary.
President Stoltz, trustees, I now ask Chief of Secondary Education, Mr. Mark Fowler, to join the conversation. Mr. Fowler.
Dr. Wright, thank you. As you heard tonight, there's amazing things happening in secondary education with what you saw at the high school and the parade. And the Richmond High School counselors have planned 3 college visits this semester for interested juniors and seniors. They'll be going to IU Indianapolis, IU East, and Ball State on some campus visits. Dennis Middle School hosted Challenge Day, September 12th through 14th. I had the unique opportunity to go and volunteer for one of those days, and that was an amazing experience with the staff and the community and students, volunteers from Reed Hospital. Miss Leslie Bolser did an amazing job helping to organize that, and a big thank you to Reed Hospital for their financial generosity for that. Test Intermediate, they applied for a Reflex Math grant, and we were awarded that. We're not sure on the amount yet, but it targets math fluency, and so that's something that some of our students in 5th and 6th grade really struggle with, and so we're awaiting the amount of that, and we'll see where that goes. And then lastly, Hibbard with their STEAM program to kind of cap off the 6 weeks, they had a robot parade that went around the halls with the robots the students coded. So my son was able to see that. Miss Hazakoster's class did a great job, and he said it was amazing. So lots going on in secondary, and they're all good things. So,
Thank you. All right, moving on to exceptional education.
President Stoltz, trustees, I now ask Mrs. Elizabeth Markwood to join us to share her highlights and happenings from her department. Mrs. Markwood.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. So my first highlight is I wanted to highlight Kelsey Sickman, the EL teacher at Dennis. She worked in collaboration with Amigos to bring Rafael Sanchez to Dennis Middle School, and he is a reporter with WRTV in Indianapolis. So he talked to a group of EL students, encouraged them about having pride in their ethnicity and heritage. His message was just about their future roles as potential leaders and what opportunities they would have in their community. He talked with each and every individual one of the students, asked them what they wanted to be when they grow up, and what their hopes were for the future. So it was a wonderfully positive experience for our students. And then the IDOE opened a competitive grant for funds to provide additional training for paraprofessionals, and so we submitted an application for that grant and heard that this week that we were approved for that grant. So this will provide additional professional development and training skills for our paraprofessionals, just to give them additional knowledge and skills that they need to help excel in their roles, which will just impact the students that they work with.
Thank you. Questions?
I got to see Rafael Sanchez's video on the Amigos site. That was pretty cool to see.
And Mr. Walden was remarkable with that, and I know Mrs. Markwood can even allude further, and our teachers surely experience it on a daily basis. The number of students that are arriving to us do not speak a lick of English, but yet we still are here, and our teachers still stand prepared to serve them. I know that we are working now to find that many more resources and supports for those students, and also most importantly for our teachers, so that those students feel right at home and part of that Richmond family like every other student. And so, Rafael Sanchez, I know you probably thought he was a little taller, but in person, he's smaller than me.
A little guy.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
All right, operations 4.06.
Yes, ma'am. President Stoltz, trustees, I ask that Mrs. Karen Scalf, our Chief of Operations, join the conversation with her highlights and happenings. Mrs. Scalf?
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Wright. The last couple weeks have been super busy in operations, which is usual. We have been wrapping most of the HVAC projects out in the buildings. We still have a few that will be continuing throughout the winter, but it's nice to see those punch lists starting to wrap up in some of the areas that we've been working so hard over the last 6 to 9 months to accomplish. So that will be nice to see those come to fruition. We've also been working on an auction, which will be held October the 7th. That is before you tonight on the agenda, so we'll be talking about that soon, but that will be happening, and all of the Warner crew have been very busy out in the buildings picking up things that have been obsoleted. So a huge thank you to them as they've been working to make room and get that all organized. The Health Services Division is offering to our employees a flu shot clinic in each of the student buildings next week, so they will be out in buildings. There is a schedule that HR has sent out, and we'll be continuing to send out reminders for staff. For anyone who is interested in getting a flu shot, they are welcome to do that in their building on their day. If they cannot make it on the day that their clinic will be handling that, they are always welcome at the RHS clinic. And there is a day set aside, which is Wednesday, October the 4th, from 9 to 11 and from 2 to 5 for any employees to stop by. So the admin building and the Warner building will utilize that day as their clinic day, but that is the timeline for staff who are interested in a flu shot. They are also having a Flulapalooza at the Meridian Clinic on South 9th Street. That address is 520 South 9th Street. It is open to our community. So we invite all of our families and our friends to participate. That will be happening from 1 to 6 p.m. on that day. And it was highly successful last year, so they are continuing that program this year. And then the most exciting thing is in the last few weeks, we have opened a second nacho and taco line at RHS.
That has been the most exciting thing for the kids. And when I thought there could not be longer lines in the nacho line, we have exceeded my expectations. So it has helped lines move faster. We are getting more efficient every day with that because we have found that to be extremely popular, especially with those freshmen who didn't get it last year at Dennis. So it is fun to watch them go through that line, and I will say it's my favorite too, so I understand it.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, moving on then to communications and marketing, 4.07.
President Stoll's trustees, our amazing Bridget Hazelbaker could not be with us this evening. However, she and I just 2 weeks ago attended the Indiana School Public Relations Association annual fall conference. And at this conference, we were able to glean and take away yet again strategies and tools that we will utilize to continue to try to improve upon our communication with not only our school community, but also with our Board of Education, with one another. And in short, I know that Mrs. Hazelbaker, she received an award while we were there for a regional award for her services and time in that role. But she most had fun teasing me and sharing with the audience all of the things that she hints at me while I'm recording those amazing superintendent address. You don't enjoy the, I'm teasing. She always shares that I should not lick my lips, or I should not use my sweat, things that the camera picks up. And so there were 3 news journalists that were there, and we had an opportunity to go through mock interviews and the whole 9 yards, and they agreed by far I was one of the best. At least that's what I think I heard. But nevertheless, we had a good time, and she would have loved to have been here, but she'll be here next time.
All right, thank you. So next, other discussion. Anything board members want to highlight or bring up?
I guess we can share with the board that board member Pickering and Stoltz and I were able to visit a couple weeks ago at Hibbard to see the new STEAM program. We visited in just about every classroom and also visited in that Logos program and the applied skills. And yesterday we got to visit Baxter School and had a nice tour with Mrs. Hobbs and read a book in a classroom. And we have plans to visit other schools in the works. So it's great for us to get in the buildings, talk to teachers, see students, and lay our eyes on what's happening in the buildings. So.
The past 2 days, I was able to attend the ISBA Fall Conference in Indianapolis with Dr. Wright, and I'm not going to go into detail about the breakout sessions and everything, but just as an FYI for the board members, it was very informative this year. It was much better than last year, and I was really glad to see it, and it was really well attended, and the breakout sessions were on point. They were really good.
All right. Anything else? Okay, moving then on to 5.01, we have public commentary. Kim, all right. Kim, how many do we have? 9? Okay. All right. So for those who wish to comment at this evening's board meeting, the maximum time to speak is 5 minutes. Please keep your comments fact-based and within the time permitted. Comments are not to be personally directed or abusive. Comments regarding and recognizing the work of staff and students are always welcome. However, critical remarks concerning specific school personnel or students are to be made through the complaint process available in Policy 8130. School board members do not respond to public comments during the meeting, but you will receive a personal follow-up email from the board president. All right, Kim, who do we have first?
Good evening. My name is Penny Shank. I'm a proud 1972 Richmond High School alumni. After graduating, I attended Ball State University, graduating with a degree in special education. I knew I wanted to return to Richmond to teach, the place where I received a wonderful education. I was proud of RCS, first as a student and then as a teacher here. Many graduates from 72 came back to Richmond to teach. I believe we were proud to be a part of the place that gave us our education years before. Many of us taught here and stayed here until retirement. I joined Richmond Association of Classroom Teachers, what is now known as Richmond Education Association, in the fall of 1978, and was still a member when I retired in 2018 after teaching in the system for 40 years. As much as I was proud to be a teacher, I was also proud to be a member of REA. The last few years, I was able to be a member of the RCS REA discussion group and learned ins and outs of how the school system really works. I looked forward to those meetings and having discussions with school administrators and other teachers. REA has been fortunate enough to have a leader, an advocate, a spokesperson for all teachers and students. She has spoken with dignity and grace during discussion time and has been respected by teachers and students alike. She has served our students well in her building, preparing them for the future in high school and beyond. She has dedicated her life to the youth of Richmond. It breaks my heart that the school system is even considering terminating the contract of such a dedicated teacher and teacher advocate. She has been a capable teacher for over 3 decades and is a highly qualified and respected teacher. She has been chosen as a most influential teacher to students for academic excellence and has been Teacher of the Year for her building. Last year, I returned to help with 2 IUE students I subbed to get their hours needed to receive a special education degree. While I was subbing, several RCS teachers in the system left mid-year to go to higher paying positions and to teach closer to home. It used to be difficult to get into RCS to teach because so many wanted to be a part of this corporation. Now they're leaving. Teachers took pride in doing their jobs here. They did not feel threatened and could do their jobs without feeling unappreciated. That seems to be a thing of the past now. Look at how many teachers are leaving and how many teaching openings there are each year. Please think this through. Return the teacher to her teaching position where she is needed to teach the youth of Richmond. Make this again a place to be proud to teach, not a temporary step along the way.
Thank you, Penny. Kim, who do we have next? Okay.
I'm Dixie Robinson, and I've been in the school system in various capacities for over 50 years. Dr. Wright, President Stoltz, and members of the school board, one of the 6 board goals for Richmond Community Schools is to become a professional learning organization. Professional learning organizations are places where educators meet regularly, share expertise, and work collaboratively to improve teaching skills and the academic performance of students. Discussion in RCS between teachers and administrators was a time for educators and administrators to work regularly, share expertise, and work collaboratively to improve working conditions and performance of teachers so they can do well in their professional learning organizations. It's called teamwork. It builds strong relationships and trust among team members. It is the simple idea that students learn more when their teachers work together. And there is also much research out there that says school systems work better when teachers and administrators work together. SEA 486 has now made it optional if administrators want to discuss with REA such things as curriculum. Who in the world are the experts here? Student discipline. Who are the experts here? Other things such as class size, school safety, and hiring and retention of teachers is also off the table for discussion. Who knows more about this than teachers? I can tell you one thing, it is not the Indiana legislators who are making the rules. If things aren't mandated, they often do not get done. I appreciate the fact that you say you're having conversations and dialogue with the teachers, but I would be much more interested in the results or outcomes of those discussions. How is it helping students and teachers? You need effective teachers with experience who know how to engage and bring out the best in students. Please, please, do not get rid of one of your best with years of effective teaching and experience. This person has put in 36 years of loyalty, support, and hard work on behalf of students and teachers. And this is what they get for it? How shameful. Your teachers, your teachers are your most valuable asset, who need to be listened to, respected, and valued. They should have the right to express their views without fear of reprisal. Listening with an open mind is a good thing, not a bad one. The REA leadership is doing their job when they advocate for and support the teachers. They are responsible in their role as an REA leader. As Colin Powell, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Secretary of State said, and I'm quoting here, "Being responsible sometimes means pissing people off." We have enormous challenges in RCS right now. Isn't it about time we all work as a team to responsibly solve them? I stand with professional educators who are skilled at what they do and are doing more than their jobs require.
All right, thank you, Dixie. Kim, who do we have next?
Dr. Wright, Board President Stoltz, board members, I rise tonight. I didn't prepare comments by writing them down, but I want to speak from my heart. You play an important role in RCS, and how you treat people matters. I rise in support of premier teachers. This room is full of premier teachers who work on behalf of their kids. There's a lot of premier teachers who are grading papers tonight, who are making lesson plans, who didn't have the time to come to this board meeting and spend their evening in order to show their support for the travesty that's going on in Richmond Community Schools right now. Dixie Robinson was not only my teacher, She was my team leader when I became a teacher at Dennis. A premier colleague of mine who is not here tonight, who I am here to support. I can't tell you what a fantastic premier teacher she is. And her students are spending many of their days, perhaps, in the auditorium, as RCS is working to save some money on the budget. When you can't work with somebody like Kelly McDermott.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
We've got to keep it.
When you can't, let me rephrase it. When you can't work with somebody, a premier teacher who represents other premier teachers in this district, when you can't work with them, something is wrong. And whoever is responsible for that, it's time for them to leave. Good things happen for our students when good things happen for our teachers. Don't forget that. And what you're doing in this environment is demoralizing this teaching staff and demoralizing this community, and it's not right.
All right, Kim, next.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
My name's Keith Morey. Members of the board, admin staff, teachers, members of the public, thank you for all being here. For the first time since my term ended in January, I lost sleep last night thinking about RCS. I have the unique experience of having been both a teacher and an REA member, as well as a board member, and it's from that vantage point that I share my thoughts today. For over 10 years now, the state has been siphoning money away from public schools and pitting us against each other. Now is not the time to battle each other for the scraps. The current climate in Richmond Community Schools is not good for kids, and it's quickly eroding what's left of an already tired and demoralized teaching and administrative staff. And I say administrative staff as well. Working in public education is challenging. The students of this community need you and you, everyone, all around. I can't face everybody at once. But they need all of you to work together, listen with empathy, and compromise. The teachers, paras, support staff, drivers, custodians, administrators, central office staff, board members, and everyone else who works for all of the kids in this district work incredibly hard every day for the betterment of children. It's time to start doing it together. Thank you.
All right, Kim, who's next?
Good evening, school board, administration, teachers, and the community. My name is John Wessel McCoy. I speak as a parent. I'm not a teacher here, I'm not in REA, but I speak in support of REA. I speak in support of the teachers, and I speak in support of Mrs. McDermott. My family has come here, we've been here for a year now. We moved here to Richmond. My son, he's a freshman. He was here, but he went to take my 4-year-old to feed her at the concession stand at the volleyball game. So anyway, but you know, if this keeps dragging along, he needs to speak here too, because I want to tell you that one of his favorite teachers last year in 8th grade was Mrs. McDermott. Now, I'm new. I don't know. But it seems like some kind of mistake has happened here. I just saw the trouble, this trouble that everyone is facing in here, in terms of how, you know, in terms of the resources, and there must be some kind of mistake that you're going to that you're going to terminate what my son has found to be one of the best teachers here. What kind of example does that set? It seems to me, it seems to me that there's a mistake, and I believe that mistakes can get rectified. They can get solved. This is a public space, it's a secular space, but I studied the Bible, and Luke is on my mind here when Jesus talked about the unjust judge. Now, I'm not saying y'all are unjust judges here, but Jesus said that even an unjust judge will act and treat justly the poor widow. You've got an amazing teacher here, and I don't know what's going on, and I want to know, and I think that a mistake has been made, and it can be rectified, and teachers deserve to have a voice about how these schools are run. They have a voice about how their work is done here, and it seems to me that Mrs. McDermott was just being a leader for this community here. I just leave it to you, humbly, as a parent who's new to here, that it doesn't seem like we can afford to make these kinds of mistakes. Thank you.
Next.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Gard. I'm a member of the IWW. I have been a proud Wobbly since my first paycheck when I was 16, and I serve here as a reminder and a warning. First off, a reminder that what is going on in Richmond is not staying in Richmond. In this room, you have hundreds of eyes that are not only of this community, but through greater and solidarity movements around the state and even around the country. I urge you to remember that. People here are not alone. We have support, we have the numbers. And with that, the warning. Just look at this. We had to change venue space for the turnout for a meeting. Imagine what can be done if the union is not respected, is not acknowledged, and is not given the fear that it deserves. Teachers here dedicate their lives to working to better the community, and all it seems like is you're casting that aside for any reason that you feel is justified. But I can tell you, as a community member, seeing what is going on, that is not the case. You are driving these teachers to extreme measures, and I would like to end with one simple fact. This is not the end.
All right, next.
Good evening, I'm Beth Herrick. I've had some email exchanges with President of the board and CC'd all the board because I know y'all share them if I don't. So I try to honor that. And of course, give this courtesy to Superintendent Wright. I reached out a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, seeking information and understanding about the situation. And Nicole encouraged me to seek out the ULPs, the unfair labor practices, which I did, and those documents paint a really ugly picture. My email spells that out more fully. I'll just name a couple of things. The allegations include a brash, oversimplified win-lose characterization of the relationship between RCS and REA. Thankfully, Superintendent Wright tried to diffuse that and ask for grace. We need that. The recent dismissal that was made in the second ULP and amendments, from what I can see, my rationale that I laid out in my emails, appears to be unjust and without good cause. Without further information from you all, it's hard to see it otherwise. My email said that. I wanted to show up here and give you the respect to say it with my voice as well. I look forward to more information coming out. I look forward to a more full picture. I hope there is a more full picture that we'll get to see at some point, and hopefully a speedy resolution to both ULPs. We need that. The message that was given to the community from RCS yesterday had about 5 points. Improving the relationship between the administration and the faculty and staff was looking brighter for a few reasons, was the message that I heard. One, more supplemental income for teachers that was approved in the spring. Two, the tour that Superintendent Wright and the HR folks went on in spring 2023 to meet with over 90% of the teachers. That's what it said. I'm telling you what it said. That's impressive. 3, the board, executive, and cabinet periodically meets with REA, both for insights about the whole school system and for collective bargaining. 4, a note that SCA 486 happened and trying to figure out what that means and move forward as positively as possible. And then the smoothest rollout of the school year in years. That's what it said. Let me finish. That's what it said. I want to say that of those points, please keep meeting with teachers. Please keep doing that. That tour, I heard about it. I even saw Dr. Wright in my son's school building when he was on that tour. I got to shake his hand and greet him warmly. I'm so happy to see that. Keep listening to the community, to the teachers, to the RCS community and staff. Keep fighting for more dollars. The supplemental income, whether the process was right or not, the supplemental income is needed, right? We know that. I hope that the money that we're working on getting will be able to will be diverted towards greater staff compensation. We need that. We need to keep the best and brightest here, staff and admin and faculty, all of it. Keep listening. So I want to end with my call to you. Keep up the communication. Keep seeking for common ground. Ray almost kicked off the meeting, not quite. Let me start with a pledge. Ray almost kicked off the meeting, and her biggest message I heard was she's got great teachers in her building who are putting kids first. I think that's the common ground, and I hope that as leaders you can find ways to uplift that common ground and ask the public for support. I want to know what I can do. I don't know what I can do. I can send some emails. Y'all can read them. You like them or not. You know, I can be here, but what can I do? Because I don't want to, this isn't good for anybody. It's not good for my son. It's not good for y'all up there. It's not good for the other kids he goes to school with. It's not good for the teachers. And we want better. And we want to support you. I want to support you. I think most folks do. And you. Like, it's all together. We got to do it together. Uplift the common ground, student success, and student engagement and success is that. And it depends on teachers and school administration working together. Thank you.
All right, next.
Hello, board. As as you probably know, my name is Jimmy Freiberger. I'm a student at Earlham College, and here today I want to discuss some of the issues regarding REA and administration. Now, of course, I'm no longer here as student body president or student of Richmond High School, so today I come as an observer, a community member. I want to express how the situation appears as somebody in the community, right? And the prevailing theme that I've sort of begun to discern from this is that it appears that in some way the teacher's voice is being harmed or suppressed. And when I think of voice being suppressed, normally that acts as like a metaphor, like technically you could still actually speak, you can actually vocalize. It's just that the effect of that speaking is like being suppressed in some way. But when I was thinking about what I was going to say, I thought that some of the allegations seem to suggest that these spaces in which you can literally say things are being suppressed. Like the voice is actually, truly, literally being suppressed. When you can no longer, right. When REA is no longer included in corporate discussion with administration, that space in which concerns can be vocalized is being removed, right? When the REA president is placed on administrative leave, that is an actual voice that is being removed. When there are particular annual ceremonies in which normally representative REA can speak and they're not included, that's a voice truly being removed. Now, of course, let's not forget, I'm just some guy in the community, right? I'm a community member. I don't want to act like I know the intricacies and nuances of this, right? But riddle me this. If it is true that there isn't something going on with the teacher's voice that's not being suppressed or harmed, then why is it that so many wonderful teachers with passionate voices have jumped at the opportunity today to show up and express those voices just now if there isn't some other way in which they're being suppressed? Thank you.
All right, thank you. We are now moving on to consent items. We have several consent items here. Dr. Wright?
President Stoltz, trustees, I come before you for approval for consent items 6.01 through 6.05 as presented.
Do we have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve consent items 601, 602, 603, 604, and 605 as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Stevens, a second by Mr. Zaleski. Any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next are action items.
President Stoltz, trustees, I again come before you for seven 7.01 donations, and I ask that Mrs. Jamie Bolzer, our Chief of HR and Finance, come before us for approval of 7.01 donations. Mrs. Bolzer.
Presented for your consideration, you have 13 donations received by Richmond Community Schools. I ask that you accept these donations graciously. Within that is Patricia Myers, our RHS Civic Hall, $50. Linda Morgeson, Westview Elementary, $500. EDC of Wayne County, $1,213. Earlham College, $300. Ray Wolpe, $50. Christian Connectors, $500. David Brown Appraisal Services, $100. El Bronco, $1,000. Lingle Family Charitable Giving, $500. Thor Construction, $3,750. Carroll Electric, $3,750. Wayne Bank and Trust, $6,000. And Phillips Drugs, $1,000.
All right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Walton, a second by Mrs. Brunton. Any questions or comments in regards to the donations?
Ron, do I need to abstain? Since I'm on this donation list, do I need to abstain?
No, we'll take your money for you.
Still take my money.
You probably. Yeah, we can take your money.
I'm still gonna get it. I just want to making sure it's appropriate.
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Moving on to 7.02. Dr. Wright.
Pursuant to Indiana Code 20-26-5-11.2 and effective July 1, 2023, school corporation may employ or contract with an individual convicted of certain offenses if a majority of the members elected or appointed to the governing body of the school corporation approves the employment or contract as a separate special agenda item. So ahead of you, you have the alerts that came back on the background check for report for employment, and the offenses would not exclude the employee from employment pursuant to the statute.
Madam President, I move to approve 7.02, the personnel hiring and background as presented.
Okay, we have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Mrs. Bolser.
In front of you is the 23-24 evaluation plan that just needs ratified. It is the same plan that ended at the end of last school year. It does reflect all of the input that we had received and modified throughout last school year.
I'll motion we approve 7.03.
All right, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. Questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Mrs. Bolser.
You have in front of you the 22-23 ECA risk audit reports. The ECA reports are presented for your review and approval. And a special thank you to the hard work of the ECA treasurers at each building. I know they worked exceptionally hard on those. And I would also like to add, I enjoyed spending the day with them as we went to an ECA seminar together, and that is a wonderful group of hardworking ladies, and I ask that you approve their reports.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. We're moving to 7.05. Is that Mrs. Scalf or is that
We're actually
Bolser
still
also?
7.04.
Okay.
Mrs. Bolser, is that correct,
Nope.
Mrs. Bolser? Nope.
Nope,
7.05.
I think I'm done.
Forgive me. Yes, we are moving to 7.05, and I'm going to ask the Chief of Operations, Mrs. Karen Scalf, join us in conversation for approval.
Yes, tonight before you is a request for advertising of a public auction. Richmond Community Schools has accumulated several items that have been obsoleted and are no longer needed. Building administrators have and will continue to have the ability to go and look for any items that they may need to claim prior to the auction, which is scheduled on Saturday, October the 7th at 10 a.m. at the bus garage, and that is on Salisbury Road. The advertisement will be in the Palladium item on Thursday, September 28th, and Thursday, October the 5th. Auction information may also be found at the website provided on board docs through Walther and Hawkins Auctioneers. Before you tonight, I ask for approval to advertise the annual auction.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll motion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments?
Are there any like highlight items, big ticket items?
Well, sure.
Are we selling some buses or some trucks? Or?
We have one white bus. We have one, like an F-250 truck, and then we have one dump truck. So we do have that. Everything is in as-is condition. So I will preface everything by that. It is an as-is condition for all items in the auction. And, but those are available. We have a number of just desks, chairs, filing cabinets, very random, I guess would be the word, items that either can no longer be used or are in a condition in which we have to put them in the auction. So, but everything, or for the most part, the larger items are on the website, so they can take a look at that prior to the sale on the Walther & Hawkins website now. It has already been posted even, and it does say pending your approval. So after tonight, that will be removed, and everything will be there.
I'll just say for parents of small kids, I bought some things when my oldest daughter, who's now 14, I bought it when they were like 3, and I had like an art easel and chairs and stuff, and all the way through my youngest kid, heck, my youngest kid still uses it, so it's, it is a good way to, if you're looking to supplement some activities or some furniture at home for kids to work at, for home, for studying, or anything like that, it's a good resource.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. Let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next, we have 7.06, Mr. Fowler.
Thank you, President Stoltz. Trustees, you have before you a request for an overnight trip for the Business Professionals of America. This is not anything that happens until the spring. So they will go and compete in Indianapolis, and if they qualify, they would then go on to nationals in Chicago. So as I understand it, this is an annual approval for the students in this program.
All right. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, vote passes 7-0. 7.07, Mr. Fowler? Oh, I'm sorry.
Add, Denise Selm just finished the half Ironman this weekend, so that's the sponsor for, one of the sponsors for BPA, so she performed very well and is an amazing athlete as well as a business professional advisor. So.
Yep, kudos to
Kudos
Mrs.
to her.
Selm, yes. All right, Mr. Fowler, 7.07.
Thank you, President Stoltz. Trustees, you have before you the request for approval for the 8th grade overnight field trip. That will be for both Hibbard and Dennis 8th graders. Attached, I believe, was an itinerary along with the company who will be providing the trip. So I would ask tonight for your approval for the 8th grade trip so that they can begin fundraising.
Madam President, I move that we approve 7.07, the 8th grade overnight field trip as presented.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
Madam President, there's usually an opportunity for donations to help support that endeavor for kids that maybe can't. How should those be handled?
As soon as this gets approved, Mr. Davis and I, Ms. Cooper and Ms. Loudermilk will start to talk about the fundraising donation process to push that out to parents. So that's a great question.
Thanks, Ron, for asking that, because I was going to do the same thing. And please note, when you get that, if you will address something to each of us. These field trips they're incredible. However, we want to make sure that every student that has the opportunity to go can go, and if we can help out in any way, please send us that information.
Absolutely.
I was excited to see the trip to New York City. I know in the past it's been Washington, D.C., and last year somewhere else, part of the group, but together. Looked like a great trip, a baseball game and some museums and Coney Island, and looks like fun and educational.
And Mrs. Brunton, yes, I too, as an old history teacher, was, at Washington, D.C., but to know that the students had a voice in this process, and to know that they were supported, and more importantly, they too wanted to include such things as the visit to NYU, Columbia, the 9/11 Museum. I know that there's an opportunity to even rearrange and provides so that they get around to the Statue of Liberty and some of those other historic sites, Ellis Island. But no, this is going to be amazing, and I know the students are truly dialed in and bought in.
All right, we have a motion as well as a second on the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next, we have 7.08, school improvement plans. Mr. Fowler.
Yeah, President Stoltz, Board of Trustees, you have before you the school improvement plans along with the signed acknowledgement from the building level representatives for the school improvement plans, and I move that we accept all school improvement plans for the 23-24 school year.
I don't know that you get to move, but you could recommend it. No.
You know, I didn't mean to go out of my lane there. My apologies.
Would anyone like to move?
I make the motion.
I'll second.
All right. We do have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments for Mr. Fowler?
I'm always just very impressed with the amount of time and how extensive these are, and the list of teachers and instructional coaches and interventionists and principals that are listed as part of putting these plans together. As we look through them, they're complex and very detailed, and a lot of thought went into the students and the schools, and appreciate all the teachers who contribute to that.
Definitely. All right. So with our motions, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next, we have 7.09, Mr. Baker.
President Stoltz and trustees, I request that you approve the following stipends for preschool teacher Carrie Harris. First stipend would be the lead preschool instructor for the 23-24 school year, and the second stipend would be for the preschool master mentor for the 23-24 school year.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve 7.09, the preschool stipend as presented.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, vote passes 7-0. Next, we have item 8.01, presentation on a real estate opportunity. And
President Stoltz, trustees, I ask that we turn our attention back to Mrs. Scalf, our Chief of Operations, who has a presentation regarding an opportunity to acquire real estate. Mrs. Scalf.
Good evening again. Tonight we are going to talk about an opportunity that we have that has, to this point, not been available to us in any fashion. And so it is what I would consider, I guess, unprecedented. As we have a conversation, please feel free to stop and ask questions. This is very informal, and I just wanted to get some information out to you so that we could have a conversation just following. So tonight I have received a proposal for RCS to possibly purchase the real estate parcel which contains McBride Stadium and John Cape Field. So with that, it is an interesting and very wonderful opportunity for us. It is a facility that we utilize. We currently rent that facility during our baseball season. And so it is something that has already been a part of the RCS family and a part of the RCS landscape. We just have not had the opportunity to do anything that is ours with it. And so this is something that is a really, I feel like, great opportunity to think about. I think it's something that would benefit our students and our community, and we'll just talk about that a little bit more as we go. So the proposed property, Mike, I'm sorry. Can you keep going one more, please? I forget, I have to tell Mike, I apologize. So the property itself is in green. It is a proposal that the purchase price is based on investment. So part of the cost that we have agreed that would be utilized as the purchase price would require that we at least invest in the property. That was part of the offer. It is something that we agreed is necessary to the property, and it's something that we also know to be true, having used that property over the years for quite a long time, in fact, since the beginning of our baseball program. Mike, if we can move. So I wanted to give you a little bit of history about McBride Stadium. It is originally built in 1936. That grandstand has been around since the beginning, as well as the green fence, which I did not know until fairly recently. So that green fence means a lot to some people. That's what they know. And so it's very interesting to think about. It is a parcel of 19.969 acres. At the corner of West Main Street and 13th Street. It also goes to Peacock Road. So that is something that the parcel is a pretty good piece of land. It has a seating capacity at the stadium of 1,787 people. It has seen its most major renovation in 1995, so it needs a little love, which we know as we look ahead. Some interesting facts. The stadium's named after Joseph Donald McBride, who was the park superintendent at the time it was built. The field was recently, within the last 20 or so years, named after John Cate, who is an RHS alumni, a state-winning coach for RHS, and has coached collegiate teams as well. It has also been the home of minor league teams. The Richmond Roses were here from 1946 to 48, the Richmond Robins in 1949, the Richmond Tigers 1950 to 1952, and the Richmond Roosters from 1995 to 2005. It's been the home of collegiate league teams, the Richmond River Rats from 2009 to 2015, and currently is the home of the Richmond Jazz since 2016. It has also been the former home of the Earlham College Quakers. Go Quakers. And the IHSAA home of our Richmond Red Devils and Seton Catholic Cardinals. I have to say that because my son plays for Earlham, so just a little plug. But with that, we know that this has to be considered very seriously and not lightly. So as we've thought about whether to bring this to you, we've taken a serious look at the advantages and the challenges that it brings with it, because it is something that we want to consider. It does not come without challenges. However, it really does have a lot of advantages that far outweigh those challenges. So the advantages that we see is that the real estate would be owned by us. We don't have a lot of real estate that is available to us right now as far as green space. Right now we rent that facility, so it would provide us with the ability to own our baseball field. The purchase price is the cost of less than 2 years rental. So it does seem very reasonable that that would be something that we would consider. It provides improvements to our multiple athletic fields. It is not just about baseball. This opportunity would provide us with the space needed to rethink and reimagine a lot of our athletic facilities in a way in which we've been desiring to do for a while. It has been a conversation as we've looked at master planning, as we have looked at multiple years worth of facility planning. It gives us a lot of possibilities that we didn't have before. And it's something that we'll talk about a little more as we go. It will also be a revenue generator that we currently don't have. In just the small amount of buzz that some of the inner staffing that have been a part of, not in our building so much, but around the city that have a lot of networking there, they have reached out. There's a lot of interest. We do youth programs. There's a lot of interest in growing that youth program opportunity, and with that would come revenue. The other thing is that it would also provide us with community connection that we already have, but we would be able to grow it. There's nothing better than a Friday night at the football field or at a basketball game, a Friday or Saturday in the winter, and we're going to grow that with programs throughout the year. having the ability to have 3 seasons there. So if you aren't familiar with the baseball or the softball world, it is now a 3-season sport, both of them. Lots of us have sat in the middle of snow. A lot of us have sat in rain and cold all the way up to November. So it's something to think about that we maybe haven't been able to before, but it is something of interest in the community. Just a note, the YMCA did a study on youth programming, and baseball and softball is their #1 interest point that the community doesn't have enough facilities for. This would help meet a community need, and we could be a great part of that. The other fun thing to think about is that we would be able to do special events. There's nothing better than going to the ball game and having some fireworks afterward. It's a family-friendly venue. There's lots of things that can happen there. I've already talked about fundraising, not particularly about this, but about coordinating some fundraising with our athletics areas. And there's a lot of our community partners that we already work with that would be like, that would be so much fun to have this or that at an athletic event. And so I know that this facility would also lend itself to having opportunities for that growth as well here at RCS. There are some challenges, and we are going to be very, very real about those tonight. So with that, we're going to have a lot of work. We're going to have a lot of investment of time and resources. We are going to be super careful with those resources, but it's real. And so it's something that we need to be aware of. The other part is an ongoing budgetary consideration. This is something that it will become a part of our yearly budget. With that, once we get things brought up to where we at RCS bring our facilities to, that ongoing cost will be much less than the beginning and the startup, but it is something that we need to be aware of. So what are our proposed investments? This is something that we have many times walked the property. We have talked with facility workers, with facility directors, so that I could make sure that I knew what I was looking at when we started talking about this. I do want to just be very transparent. I've called a few other schools that have recently built fields and just said, how much did you invest? What did that look like? Some redid their old fields, so they just cleared them and started over. Some had to start with green space from scratch. The ones that did the green space from scratch, so I'm going to give you an example. Union City is a fairly small school in Randolph County. They have a beautiful complex for their softball and their baseball areas. When they did each separate field, because they did them over a couple of years, it was pre-market change. So what I will say is the construction market has drastically changed, but they did this pre-COVID, pre-market change. And they spent in the range of $300,000 to $350,000. A lot, and most of it, was on grading the property to make sure that it was the right grade for a field. We would already have that done through this. We just have to improve. So knowing that, that gives us a frame of reference on if we were going to build a field, what would we be looking at? We have to increase that because the market is drastically different. So we would be looking probably more in the $400,000 to $500,000 range, I would think, if we were going to build new from scratch on a field that doesn't currently exist. Does that make sense to everybody? The market is still higher than it was pre-COVID. It is not going down yet. We're seeing some good changes to competitiveness in the field again, but we are not quite seeing reductions yet in that market. So the other proposed investments that we're actually looking at if we acquire this property, and these are immediate needs. These are something that we would want to do prior to opening in the spring or just shortly after, is security. There is not a lot right now. It's secure. It's just we would do some additional security there. We would need to do landscaping and field cleanup immediately. We need to remove some trees, remove some green overgrowth. We need to just clean up the space a bit and make it a little bit easier once we get to spring to start getting after. We need to do a lot of concrete work. We need to roof the grandstand. That is an absolute. The concrete is also an absolute. We need to paint it if we want to make it Red Devils. So it's currently green and tan. That is a Parks Department color, but I don't know about you guys. I really want it to look like it's a Red Devil place if it's ours. So probably some painting. That's probably not something absolutely necessary to first year, but it is something that will bring a lot of pride for our kids and for our families as well as our community. We need to do a little bit of bleacher repair. This is not a lot. It's just something that we need to do. Our maintenance crew can actually handle that because it is with the wood bleachers. So that's something we can do internally. We need to do some fencing work. That is something that we would probably be able to do parts of at a time, but we need to handle some of that sooner rather than later. The public address system and the scoreboards, these are simply because we don't know what condition they're in, and so there's some things with that I just want to go ahead and allow for that in the event that we need it. That's just something that you never know until you flip them back on, and lots of times light bulbs will go out, things like that. Light bulbs for scoreboards are not cheap, and it is something that we probably need to address just from looks. They need a little bit of an update. It's been a while. So right now, these pictures were taken just last week. And these are some things that we need to do right away. I just wanted you to be able to see why it's so important. If we can go back just for a second, Mike, on that one before. So when I say concrete work, that second picture is actually the right side of that first picture. You will note that triangular piece that comes down on that concrete wall. That should only have a gap from there of about this much. The other side of the wall is minimal. We have an issue with that wall, and we have to take care of it right away because the winter will not be kind to it. So it's something that I know that we'll need to get in there and tackle. That is on the 13th Street side, so we will also need to do that so that it is secure as well. We can go ahead and flip, Mike, thank you. So this is just a bit of the field condition. Need to do some work, need to do some rolling and some cleaning up of those lines. You can see we need to probably seed some grass and do some things with that, as well as that's a picture of the roof up there on the grandstand. It is rolling back. Winter will not be kind to it. The wood right now underneath is very good. If we let it get to the weather, it will not be by spring. And it is, when I say it is beautiful under there, I really do mean it. It is a work of art. The way that they have, and I know Brad does this all the time, so he can probably tell me what it's called because I don't know, but it's really pretty. The way that they did the layout of that so that it will last for a very long time. Mr. Hamilton walked with me and he said they don't make them like that anymore. Correct. And it's true. So we just need to protect that and make sure we can hang on to it. The wood does look in good condition. There are some edges that we do need to make sure that we get fixed and cleaned up, but if we can get a roof on that thing, we can save that grandstand without any problems. The other thing is just a picture of that fence, and that's simply because that's a little bit of aesthetics, and it's something that we just might want to think about if we don't do it now, in the future. What do we want that to look like? Is it something that we maybe want to take a different look at it? Maybe it's something that we want to keep for nostalgia, but we do have to do something with fencing. It's a little bit, it's not wobbly, but it's dented, and so we'll probably want to clean that up a little bit.
Karen, can I ask you about the field for a minute?
Yes.
So in the spring, I went to my first baseball game here, just because I'd never been to one, and I had parents around me, and they were talking about the field and about the concerns about holes in the field and injuries.
Yes.
So can you
That
talk
is
about
priority for us when we get there. So I wanted to be a little sensitive because I think that one thing that I know is John Cate has been on that field working for his fall. He's having a youth league for fall ball at the stadium, and he has been out there every day for the last month working this field to get it in a better condition for that. We still have work to do. He has been gracious enough to take my call or to call me if we had questions and things like that. He really loves this place, and so it's something that he's put a lot of time in recently to help make better, but he's one person, and so we will have to tackle that right away. Yeah. All right, Mike, thank you. Okay, so the longer term proposed investments. This is where it gets kind of fun, and by fun, I mean scary but fun, because anything is possible out here as far as what we want to do. We have the opportunity to make this the home of Red Devil softball. It would be really great to have a complex where we have locker rooms for both teams. We have practice fields if we want them. We can really do some great things for both of those programs on this site. Some things that are kind of interesting as we look at it, in Lafayette, they have recently built a field, and you can take a look at it. It's called Loeb Field, and Mr. Bolser brought my attention to it, and I was actually fascinated by it. I went and kind of dug around for a long time about it. And it's a multi-purpose field. So not only is it baseball, it's softball, and it's soccer. And it's really nice to be able to have multiple fields working on this for multiple seasons and for multiple uses. So it is something that we are going to look at. I don't know if financially we'll be able to do it. We'll talk about that in the future. But it is exciting to even think that it's a possibility, because who knew? And it would be really great for our community. Knowing that YMCA study came out, knowing that youth sports is stronger than ever in our community, it is a really, really great opportunity for us to think through all of the possibilities on this area. The other thing is that we have other opportunities to think about. So if we did that, if we moved softball, we have a softball field here. We have had, I can't even tell you how many conversations about tennis, because I know, like, Member Stevens, Mr. Cross, and I have had year after year after year conversations about tennis, because it's on a site that makes it really difficult to stay in really great condition without resealing, recoating about every 3 years. It could go somewhere, either the softball field where it is now, maybe over to the McBride landscape. There's options if we have green space. So it's just something kind of exciting. Like I said, soccer, there's opportunity there. We do have the field that's over by the old state hospital, and that could also lend itself to revenue. I mean, you can have tournaments, you can have community things, you can do rentals for practices. There's just a lot of opportunities here that we wouldn't have had without it. Mike, I'm ready to move on, please. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the terms that have been proposed. The terms that we are looking at, not only in the purchase price, and the investment, is that the city of Richmond would retain the first right of refusal should we ever decide to sell the property. That is absolutely something that if we sold a property, I would probably want, if it was a property like that as well. It makes sense because then it stays for the youth of our city, it stays for the community, so that's something that they had asked for. The City Parks Department has also asked that they are allowed to continue to use a softball facility throughout the future. And this is something that they agreed that they would see a usage fee, much like what we've been charged to utilize McBride now. So that is very relative to what we're doing as far as the right now on our baseball season. Mike, if you could click that link. Provided is the projected budget. I will be very, very, very clear. This is a very conservative estimate, and this is because whenever you're doing construction or you're doing updates, or we don't know what we'll get into when we get there. However, we know the work that needs to be done. So the items on the list are the items that we'll need to do. The dollars and cents of it, I will say, are a little high, but I did want to be very real because it is probable that we may see investment of this nature. To get it started, especially when we are talking about updating the softball areas, it's going to be a decent amount of money. The ongoing costs, once we get it there, you can see that those are roughly, and I am sorry, it is really small on there. Let me get to mine. My computer decided to freeze. But the ongoing costs I have marked at $200,000. What I will say is that does include a seasonal staff member. I know that was a question that the board had, at least one. That is probably high. I just don't know what the utilities are. I don't know about some of those items like security until we are able to get some quotes and get some things going to know. So I wanted to be a little cautious in that because I just don't know right now what that's looking like. Part of the agreement is that that would be delivered to us within a certain time frame. So I will have that information as if we decide to go this way as we would approach closing closer. But I did want to be safe in that. So that's why you see that number a little bit high in the annual. Once we get through the startup, we will know for sure what that looks like. But that's there for your review to know what kind of investment we're looking at financially. One note on if this does come to fruition, these are capital resources. So they are a part of operational budgets. They are not a part of general fund budgets. So that's just something that you would need to be aware of. That is where all of our facility money is. And this would be a high school facility, just like Tiernan Center, just like Leibolt Field. All right? So how are we going to get there? Mike, if you can move to that next slide. I have some ideas, because I'm always full of ideas, and I have a ton more, but I limited myself for the sake of time. So I think that it's super important that we understand that we are going to love our past, but we're going to prepare for the future as we look ahead. So how are we going to do that? We are going to have some work days, whether they are, our RCS staff only, whether they're community work days. There are a lot of people that love this facility. There are a lot of people that have played here through the years, and there are a lot of people that I think that would be interested in helping out sometimes if they can. So just offering that to the community, looking at long-term maintenance development, making sure that this property stays good a long time. 1936 is about when the high school was built, so we have a track record of loving our stuff, and I want to do that here. Seasonal help. Seasonal help is going to be needed because we aren't going to be as heavy there in the winter time. I call it seasonal because it's not going to be all year. It's going to be your spring, summer, fall. And that's going to be super important with that maintenance development because you can't do some things in the winter. And that is one of those fields or areas in general that it's basically, you are limited on that time frame pretty tightly. Community partnerships, this is an interesting one because we've already played ball there. I get a lot, and I got a lot as CFO, of requests to be able to partner at this area during our baseball season. We have never had that opportunity because it's not our facility. So having that opportunity, I could see a lot of growth in that. I could see a lot of people being willing to work with us and maybe have, some family nights for their employees. There's just a lot of opportunities that we haven't been able to utilize or accept at this point, and that could probably grow here. The other thing is expansion of services. So I briefly mentioned like a club type environment, youth leagues, things like that. That is very real, and it is very popular. So if you're unfamiliar with the Westfield area, they have a tremendous facility in their city that generates multi-sport revenue all year long. Noblesville has a few areas. Dayton has a couple of areas, especially for basketball. Fort Wayne has a huge basketball and volleyball facility. So cities do this a lot of places. And it's something that if we are going to have a facility like this, we should consider. Whether we decide to or not, that's up to us, but we could consider that. As I said at the very beginning, it's just gonna take time, it's gonna take work, and we're gonna have to be willing to use that as our resource. Mike, you wanna keep going for me? So I put together a timeline. If we decided tonight, yep, we're good, let's go. Let's go ahead and say, yeah, we're willing to kind of have this happen. What would it look like? So then part of the language is that within 30 days of whenever that passes, we would close on the real estate. With that, then we could also, knowing that we're moving forward, develop a full scope of options. We would have closing and take possession at closing. Immediately, we would begin security updates, parcel cleanup, painting, etc., and that roofing is absolutely essential. January and February, we would continue work, but it probably would not be outdoors. It would be making sure that all of the systems are working. It would be, we need to run some fiber so that we can do some PA work. We would do some internal things to make sure that we were ready for the season, because what happens in March, at least for softball and baseball, they start playing about the third week of March. So they usually have their first game over spring break. That gives us very little time with good weather. What I know is, and I can't say thank you enough, Mr. Bolser and Mr. Marker, Mr. Maddox, the whole baseball team came out and worked for 2 weeks nonstop every single day. Just to get the field ready. And they had, I think that Mr. Cake came, they had a lot of dads, they had a lot of moms, they had community members come out to just help them get ready for the season. And it takes a lot. So having the time to get some of that underway before, so that we aren't as crunched in that March timeframe when the weather is really bad and we're fighting rain and we're fighting snow and we're fighting wind, it would be the most successful way that we could pull this off for a really great opening day. And that's just something that the choices that we make whatever happen. So if we want that to happen, we need to be very good about our timing, and we need to be very thoughtful about it, because we are quickly approaching the winter season, and that will very much so limit the ability for us to do some things out there. So then what would happen is the remainder of the spring and the summer, we would continue improvements. Hopefully we would open for community events. One thing that I know is that they currently, the Parks Department did not renew any current agreements. This was the natural time that they were up, and in part of their proposal was that, you know, any agreements would then go to us if we did this when this happened. So they have honored that and have not formally renewed anything. We would still, you know, have conversation about those partners. We wouldn't see any changes. It's just that they did not feel comfortable going ahead with longer term agreements, knowing this might be a possibility. And I truly am grateful for that, because then we can make that decision here if we decide to do this. So some things that, as we move forward, I just wanted to kind of to give you some brief and very quick snapshots of things that we'll do. Mike, if you'll keep moving for me. And we'll kind of move through these pretty quick. I just put some notes on what we need to do for each type of sport that we would like to move out here right now. For baseball, you will see a very brief listing of the things that we need to do pretty quickly and address in order to make sure that the season starts off right next year. For softball, if we can move on to that one, we would also need to do that. Softball would have to be extremely aggressive if we were going to open next year there. We do have a field. It is in good condition. We do not have to move that out there for next spring, but if we wanted to, we would have to get really aggressive right now. So that's something, just as you think about it, it would definitely be a goal. I just don't know if we could make that happen with the current conditions of everything and it be what we want it to be. We could open, but it will not be the way that we want it to be at that point, I don't think.
And just to be clear, it's not softball on baseball on Cape Field. It's only baseball there.
Well, we have options. So right now it would not be, but if we reworked the field to be a multi-purpose, which is possible, and that's one thing, take a look at that Loeb Field, they did that. Because they have a way to create a mound space that can be moved for softball. So it's a very, very interesting concept, and it is a beautiful field. So it's just something we do have the possibility for. You can put in movable bases, so you could vet it for Little League, you could vet it for any age group league, because your baselines change depending on your age. You could do it for softball and baseball. So it really is possible if we decide to invest in that manner. And as we look, if we go further on this, as we look ahead, we would let you know what that option would look like if we decided to continue to move forward. But it is possible. You can do it.
Currently, does the piece of property has 3 fields on it currently, correct?
It has 4.
It has 4.
It has
Okay.
4. So it has 2 softball fields, 2 baseball fields currently. So the softball field at the corner of 13th and Main, and then there is a softball practice, small, younger age practice field that is over behind the Armory. When you've grown up around here and you played all the ball, it's the Colt Field is what people know it as. We know it at Richmond as the JV field that is directly behind the Armory. That is a baseball field. And then the field next to it is softball. So McBride and the JV or Colt Field are baseball. The other 2 are softball. So right now it's a pretty equitable mix of those 2 sports. And we could keep everything in those positions. We have some options. So that's something that we'll discuss as well. We could also, one option is you could turn the what we call JV field into a softball field. It has a press box, has a concession stand, restrooms would be pretty easy to put in there. We have a lot of options with this facility. So this is just something kind of for you to know as we look at improvements. This is the current pitcher's bullpen. Needs a little work. So if we looked at softball as well, you want a bullpen for that as well. So we would need to do some work on that prior to next season as well. The other thing is just a little bit more concrete work. There's some things we just need to shore up, and we would get that done. Mike, if you could move on. Okay, so just a couple of things that we can review as we talked about. Converting the main field to be available for Little League softball, baseball, and soccer is a possibility. So it's something that we want to think about if we're going to maximize our resources, maximize the money that we put in. Is it worth that? Is there an extra cost? Or is there not an extra cost and it's just extra holes that we drill? And I do not have those answers tonight, but it's something that we are going to look into. And then, tennis courts. It's an ongoing challenge that would be resolved because we would have multiple options to look at for that. So that's something to think about. We could utilize the area of McBride for tournaments by youth leagues, by travel teams. All of those things are options. And we would also be reviving a community jewel. It is a good facility now. We would just want to make it ours and make it even better. Mike, if you could move on. So I wanted to end with something a little bit sweet. As we look at our community and what this facility means to it, there are a few people that have said it best. Michael Apresti, who is a legend here, said you could walk in here and not feel measurably different than if you walked in here in 1975 watching a game. It's pretty pretty cool to have a facility that we could have be as nostalgic as this, but make it our own and make it even better. And I really, as I was looking at this Palladium article that Josh Smith wrote, John Cate said it best for what I think we want to do. And he said, I think each year we tried to make it a little bit better than the year before. That's what we're going to do. So we aren't going to be able to do everything first year if we decide this is the way we want to go. But we will make it better every single year we have it. We do that with all of our facilities. We are tested, tried and true. And we would do it for our students because that is first and foremost what's important. The benefit and the bonus to it is we'd also be doing it for our community. So I just want to open the floor for questions, thoughts, conversation. Anybody? Okay. Well,
It's got a lot of merit to it because I know we've talked about tennis forever and the problems it has. That site is very poor for the courts that are there. They're just a maintenance nightmare.
That area is also congested with buses too. I know dismissal.
We could, well, yeah, we could. There's a lot of long-term planning there and facility planning we could look at to rework that. I do like the idea that it's not just McBride, it's the 4 fields, and it is a large parcel to where I like having options. I like not being landlocked to where the high school is now, to where our options are extremely limited. It just kind of comes down to the dollars and cents to see if it'll work.
Yeah, and I will say that I want to thank the city and the Parks Department for all the work that they have done there throughout the years. What I will also say is that we have to have conversations if we decide not to move in this direction, because there are needs there that that are true. And so with it being a facility that our kids use, it's just something that we would want to think about, especially knowing that we wouldn't own it. Is it something that, you know, the investment in it is hard when you don't own property. And so we would need to have conversation about that sport in general, because there are some things that just needs to take place in order for us to have the best option possible at that point. Every sport is super important, and every sport needs a good place to play or to participate. And it's something that has been challenging for some sports more than others, and it's something that we always talk about and we always do our best with. And this is no different. So we would just need to probably have conversation at that point. So I do want to say this is a proposal. So it is not anything definite. It is nothing that you know, we have as far as have made any decisions formally up to this point, which is why I wanted to present this information. I will leave it with you for whatever moves forward. So I just know that you needed this information, the community needed this information, and however we move here, just we'll need to decide that. Okay?
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Scalf.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Next we have a preview of upcoming meetings and events. Dr. Wright.
President Stoltz, trustees, our next scheduled board meeting will be on October 18th at 5:30 p.m. On that date, as we always exercise, we will not only exercise civics, but also highlight the tremendous things occurring here in RCS. Mrs. Hazel Baker typically would be at the podium sharing many dates, and that will be forthcoming tomorrow. However, there is one particular event that I know Mr. Mike Rogan, his team, Mr. Cook, Mrs. Sidney Cate, and others, they truly sacrificed this this afternoon to allow us to be here in this facility. The accommodations and the time that they put into rearranging this stage, because the Texas Tenors will be here this Saturday at 7:30 on this stage performing. And those who may not know who the Texas Tenors are, they are the most successful music group and third highest selling artist in the history of America's Got Talent, since appearing on the series in 2009. JC, Marcus, and John have released 5 studio albums, 2 PBS specials, 4 DVDs. They have Emmy Awards, Excellence for Children's Literature. They are not to be missed, and they will be here this Saturday at 7:30. If Mrs. Hazel Baker were here, she would want us all to take part and the community to know to come out for the Texas Tenors. And I mentioned Mr. Rogan, Mr. Cook, and the team because as soon as we wrap up here this evening, they are going to start their work in assembling for that event, which was supposed to take place all day today. So we definitely appreciate the accommodations. We appreciate participation this evening. And again, Texas Tenors this Saturday.
All right. Before we do our adjournment and bell ringer, I do want to say very happy birthday to Mr. Weber, who's spending the bulk of his birthday, it seems, with us. So hope he's enjoying that. Okay, adjournment and bell ringer.
President Stoltz, trustees, again with the adjournment and bell ringer, I would just like to highlight I was invited to be a panelist this morning through Meridian Health, one of our community partners, and speak with not only the mayor of the city, Sheriff Redder, Lisa Suttle with Meridian Health, and the topic is one that we know is all too important and one that we in Richmond Community Schools take seriously and provide a lot of support for, and that's suicide prevention. And for those students that were in attendance, as well as their parents and guardians and family, as I had alluded to, and as we all know, such an act is a permanent solution for temporary problems. And one of the things that we continue to do day in and day out, and our teachers continue to do, is stress the importance to our students of quality of life and love. And so I just commend Meridian Health Services. The speaker, the keynote is one that I believe would be great to bring to Richmond Community Schools to allow our students to hear his journey. I don't want to be a spoiler of but he jumped off the Golden State Bridge and survived, and has the story to tell and the appreciation now of life. And I think it's something that needs to be heard. And so that's something that my team and I, we will work to potentially bring to our community. Outside of that, again, as Mr. Fowler mentioned, and as was on display at the homecoming parade, just another great example and of what we even continue to experience. Tremendous things going on in Richmond.
All right. Anything else from the board before we adjourn?
Is Boston Run tomorrow?
I'm sorry.
Is Boston Run
Yes, the
tomorrow?
Boston
Okay.
Run is also tomorrow, and we have the special guests that will be there rooting our elementary students on. We'll have Richmond High School's cross-country teams, along with cheerleaders and others. This may be one of the more pomp and circumstance Boston runs that they've had in some time, and you all are more than welcome to be there. And if you want entry into the event, I know Mr. Weber mentioned that Ms. Selm is the Iron Woman event, but if you all want to run tomorrow, let us know. It's not too late.
All right. Anything else? We are adjourned. Thank you.